I'm Tabby.
And I'm Caitlin, and today we're talking about A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. It is the second book in the ACOTAR series and our personal favorite. And so we're going to do things a little bit different this week. We are going to split the episode up into two parts. For the first part, we're just going to do a synopsis of the book for those of you who haven't read it, or just those of you who need a refresher or want to hear us talk about what happens in this novel. And then in part two, we're going to dive a little deeper into like theories and symbolism and all that good stuff.
We're going to get lit the second half.
We're going to get lit the second half. Yeah, but don't worry, this first half will still be really lit.
I'm also lit right now, so it's fine.
Yeah, a little bit. So I'm going to start us off by reading the back of the book. Feyre has undergone more trials than one human woman can carry in her heart. Though she's now been granted the powers and the lifespan of the High Fae, she is haunted by her time under the mountain and the terrible deeds she performed to save the lives of Tamlin and his people. As her marriage to Tamlin approaches, Feyre's hollowness and nightmares consume her. She finds herself split into two different people, one who upholds her bargain with Rhysand, High Lord of the feared Night Court, and one who lives out her life in the Spring Court with Tamlin. While Feyre navigates a dark web of politics, passion, and dazzling power, a greater evil looms. She might just be the key to stopping it, but only if she can harness her harrowing gifts, heal her fractured soul, and decide how she wishes to shape her future, and the future of a world in turmoil. So let's get started with that. This book is split into parts, actually. So if you want to kick us off with part one.
Yeah, so part one is the House of Beasts. It is an absolutely heartbreaking beginning to the book. We start off with Feyre, who is just not doing well. Our little prologue that we get, it is her stuck under the mountain. She is still haunted by, what happened with Amarantha. She sees her in her dreams, and basically just the fact that she had to kill those two Fae, it's done a number on her mentally, and she just doesn't feel like she really deserves to be alive. Really sad. It gave me a lot of anxiety reading it as a reader, trying to put myself in her point of view. So yeah. Sarah J did a great job doing that, but it is, you really do start feeling for Feyre. She is back at the Spring Court. They have returned. She and Tamlin are engaged. They basically got engaged like a month after they got back.
Yeah.
So she's trying to just live her new life and basically pick up where she left off before under the mountain. It is really hard. She is not interested in the same things that she's been interested in. She is depressed. I mean, bottom line, she's depressed. Yeah. She has made a new friend, Ianthe, who is one of the high priestesses. Immediately just kind of gave me some bad vibes. I don't know.
Immediately we don't like her.
I love her right off the rip. Very controlling. Basically, Feyre uses her as like a crutch. While also battling these inner demons that she has. She doesn't feel worthy of Tamlin. She feels like she's broken beyond repair and that he deserves somebody who, is whole and can be that for him, which is absolutely wild.
It's wild because so while Feyre is having like these nightmares and she's feeling completely broken and depressed, and she's like, wow, like I don't deserve Tamlin. Mans is not doing much better. Like
he's not doing well.
She wakes up like violently ill from these horrible nightmares she's having, and Tamlin just like pretends to sleep through it. He will sometimes be awoken by horrible nightmares and just shift into like his beast form and like not talk about it. He'll just like prowl and brood and not discuss it. Like,
you remember those red flags that we talked about last time? Yeah, like we're making a comeback.
The red flags they've gotten so out of hand. Like Feyre is just blinded by love. Like she cannot see.
A ghost in a shell essentially, and has lost weight. She vomits up her freaking guts every single night, like can't keep down, doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, and he's just like, yeah, that'll happen. That seems normal.
Yeah, he's like, clearly she just needs time. And like Feyre is, while she's like losing it, Tamlin has guards on her all the time. Like, she cannot go anywhere without escorts. She feels like she is a prisoner in her own home, and she tries to let people know, let Tamlin know, let Lucian know, and Lucian's just like, hey, like, Tamlin just needs time. Like, you got to give him some time to chill out. Like, he almost lost you. He like witnessed your death and like basically gaslights Feyre into thinking that this is the right thing. Yeah.
Gaslit her so hard that she was like, yeah, you know what? You guys are right. I am making it really hard on Tamlin by being alive right now. Like, that's on me. It's like, Girly, Pop, what is you doing?
She's like, I'm sorry. Like, I want to die anyway. So let me just let's go back in time. Like, let me just stay dead. And they're like, no, that's not what we meant. Anyway, we talk about like Ianthe, like her not being great vibes, and it's clear to Feyre that Lucian does not like Ianthe. He's not like forthcoming about why. He's also like harboring a lot of secrets from her right now, like because he's trying to be more obedient to Tamlin and like
basically a full 180 from what he was in the first book.
Yeah, because in the first book, he was like always challenging Tamlin and like pushing Feyre to be better. And then here we are in this completely new scenario where Feyre needs him to be that friend. And he's just like, bye, who? I can't. My allegiances are to Tamlin.
We pledge allegiance to Tamlin.
Yeah, who doesn't deserve it at all. And okay, so Ianthe, like you were saying, is a crutch for Feyre. Like, Feyre could not give a rat's ass about this wedding. Like, she wants to marry Tamlin because she's in love with him, but she does not want people looking at her. She doesn't want to wear white. She feels so impure and unworthy. And Ianthe is like shouldering the brunt of the wedding planning for her. And Feyre's like, great, because I don't want to touch that.
While also like trying to weave this narrative though that like makes her seem like a good guy. I don't know, it's super strange because, you know, Feyre is the one who went under the mountain. She like fought for the salvation of Prythian, blah blah blah, and Ianthe is just like, yeah, the three of us are a power trio, and
yeah,
I am going to make us look so good. Feyre, like, don't even worry about it. Like, writes this crazy narrative that she is like just this God-given gift to the world, and like, you know, has picked the perfect dress, has picked the perfect color, has picked the, you know, perfect seating arrangements to like really just show like this act of power almost, while also putting herself in the position of power.
Exactly. She's like spinning this narrative because she's telling Feyre and Tamlin that it's what they need to heal, like as a nation, as a court, that's what they need to move forward. But Ianthe's got herself kind of like front and center. She's like, don't forget me though, I'm important, and you need me to have this narrative like come to life and like piece everything back together. So like Tamlin trusts her, Feyre trusts her, Lucian doesn't, but
Lucian hates her.
He's spineless and won't stand up for what he believes in at this point. And so, okay, so Ianthe is like helping Feyre pick colors and stuff. And she's like, what color? Roses. And she's like listing off some options and says red. And Feyre's like, no.
Just anything but red.
Anything but red. It triggers Feyre's PTSD. It reminds her of blood and Amarantha. And she just like, when she sees red, like she's
spirals.
Yeah, she's triggered. And so the day of the wedding arrives. There's a lot of details. Meanwhile, like Feyre is still like vomiting up her guts every night, including like the night before her wedding. Like, she is not like in a place of peace right now.
We spend a lot of time like following Feyre and her insecurities in the beginning, and pretty much that's what like the first 6 chapters are, just like
following. It's depressing. It's not a feel-good start to the novel. So Feyre's in this ridiculous dress. She hates it. She looks like, what does she say? Like a pastry, a cupcake. Yeah. And What color rose petals do you think are scattered down the aisle?
Sure enough, they're red.
Sure enough, Farah panics immediately. Internally, like she's still walking, but she's slowing down. And she's like, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
She is having like an internal freak out. She's
like,
shouting in her mind.
I am gonna ruin Tamlin. Again, wild concept, but she thinks she is just impure and like is terrible for Tamlin, and he deserves somebody who is just she has it together, and that's not her.
Yeah, and she is just like sorely mistaken, in my opinion. She is literally like in her mind, she is shouting like, no, like someone save me, like anyone save me. And so
who motherfucking shows up?
Who shows up?
My boy Rhys does.
It's Rhys.
It's Rhys hand.
He poops in with like darkness and magic. Because also at this point, Rhys, it's been 3 months since they returned from under the mountain, and Rhys has not called in his bargain yet. That's worth noting. But he heard that panic through the bond. He heard Feyre like, no, like somebody save me. And he shows up and he's like, hey, I'm calling in my bargain. It's time to go to the night court.
Everyone's pissed too. Like Tamlin throws a fit. The wedding guests are like scattering. Everyone's obviously terrified of Rhys. His power is insane. He's like, no, you can't take her. Like, I've got guards who will fight you. Turn around, no guards to be found. Ianthe gone. She's disappeared because she is just a weak little biatch. Coward. She's a coward. And so obviously, you know, Rhys gets what he wants. He takes her back to the night court. Tamlin can't do anything about it. He's all talk, big man, can't follow through on anything.
I know. He's so pathetic, low-key.
Pathetic.
Oh my gosh. And so, okay, so Rhys has the power to like winnow, which is how he showed up. And winnowing is basically like teleporting like through Fae magic. So that's how he teleported there. That's how he teleports them to the night court. And Farah's like, wow, that was really unsettling because they like travel through like space and time, and she's not a fan. So they get to Rhys's house, and it's like the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. It is gorgeous, peaceful, beautiful, warm.
It's what she pictured in her head when she was under the mountain, essentially.
Yeah.
Like it's the moonstone, very peaceful. It's like a place of relaxation.
Yeah, and she's confused because everyone's been telling her like Under the Mountain was inspired by the night court. She's like, where is the torturing? Where is the killing? I'm so confused. But she's not about to like ask to see it. So she's like, okay, like if this is where I'm at, that's fine. But she's mad. She's like, Rhys, you're an asshole. And he's like, you could say thank you because like I know you were about to freak out. Yeah. And so what does Feyre do as he's walking out? She throws her shoe at his head. So hard that he doesn't know it's coming, and it actually hits him. It pisses him off.
Because what we forgot to mention was that Feyre has super strength. Like she is strong. Like she is strong, and everyone's just like, yeah, that's pretty normal. And no, it's not normal. She is abnormally strong. Yeah,
no one has told her this is weird, but she has noticed it since becoming a high fae, but nobody's told her that it's bizarre. But Rhys is like, he gets hit in the head with that shoe. It probably hurt because she's real strong. And so he's mad, and he's like, she picks up her other shoe and he's like, do it. Like, I dare you. Yeah, try me, bitch. And she does it because she's, you know, she's not scared of Rhys. And so he does catch it this time because he like watches her throw it, and he like turns it to dust because he's mad. But then he like comments, he's like, interesting. And Farah's like, what? Like she doesn't say it, but she's like, what's interesting? But I'm sure it's because he's like, wow, she's really strong. So Feyre goes to sleep. She's still not well. She like cries herself to sleep, and she's like, I'm in her wedding dress. In her wedding dress. She like took off her stupid wedding dress, her stupid wedding night lingerie, and she's like, Tamlin was supposed to tear this to shreds off of me. And she like has a mental breakdown.
It was really cute.
Oh man, it's rough. She's not doing well, but she gets a little bit of sleep, and the next morning she's like, Rhys, like, what do you want with me? And he's like, I want you to learn how to read. And also,
I want to teach you how to read.
I
Personally,
want to be the one. And also, he's like, you're always like shouting things down our like bond that was created when we made this bargain. You need to learn how to put up your mental shields. And he like plays it off by saying like, I'm tired of not getting any rest because like you're always having nightmares in the middle of the night and it wakes me up and it's so annoying. So he tells her like she needs to work on that. And she's like, obviously at first she doesn't go along with it, because when has she ever like made anything easy for Reese? She's like, no. No, I don't want to.
We also meet our new best friend Moore, Reese's cousin. She's amazing and kind and immediately loves Feyre. And so they do, have breakfast together. Feyre kind of brushes Reese off, like after he teaches her how to lower and raise her shields, how to, at least write out basic sentences. They get into kind of a pissing match. Reese ends up leaving for the entire week, leaves her there. So Feyre just, wallows in her self-pity. She reunites with our best girls, Nuala and Caradwyn. We get to see them for real this time. They're not just shadows anymore. They're actually real people.
Yeah.
We're taking care of her. So spent the rest of the week practicing and learning how to raise and lower her shields. She finally returns back home to the spring court. Immediately Tamlin is like, oh my god, I missed you so much, like never leave me again. Finds out he has trashed the study, has like just gone into like this absolute fit of rage, like a true like himbo
toddler.
Yeah, man child.
Yeah.
And instead of him, being like, I want to spend time with you, I'm never going to let you go again, he was like, I'm going to interrogate you. He's like, I need you to tell me every single thing that you saw while you were at the night court.
Let me pick your brain.
Because while she was at the night court, Rhysand showed her, parts of his home, showed her, bits and pieces of the night court itself. But he also hinted at the fact that there may be war coming, and he's trying to prepare Feyre. That's why he invited her there. He wants her to work with him. He's telling her, like, hey, you have basically what you would see in a young Fae who is getting ready to take over as High Lord. Like, you are experiencing exhibiting like the same types of traits that you would see in a High Lord. And he's like, I think we should train you, blah blah blah. I think you could be a really good tool in this war. And of course Tamlin's like, absolutely not, sir.
Yeah, because Tamlin and Lucien, I don't think Lucien necessarily agrees with him, but he goes along with it. But Tamlin's reasoning is that if Feyre is trying to train these powers, one, he says that'll make her a target, because these powers that she has are like from the High Lords that exist right now. And he's like thinking if they know she has some of their power, they'll try to come kill her. He also thinks that it'll send like a message of unrest to the people. And he's like, no, like we just got done with this thing. Like we don't want anyone to worry. But like there's very much reason to worry.
Yeah, like there's some shit coming.
Yeah, but he's basically like, no, like I put my foot down. No, my word is law.
Sounds like a vampire.
Well, Tamlin acts like a vampire. Okay,
he sucks the life out of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what, they don't want to send a message of unrest. They have the tithe coming up soon, which is where everybody has to pay their dues to the spring court. They haven't had it in 50 years, obviously, because Amarantha was running rampant. Ianthe is like, now is the time. The people are healed and they are ready to pay you money.
Yeah, clearly
they're ready for it.
Clearly they're all rich right now.
Like they want to give this to you, and so they have the tithe comes around. Tamlin is a dick.
Yeah,
my god, like he is just this like ruthless, rude dictator who like has like no cares in the world for anybody. Like if you don't have the money, if you don't have whatever is equivalent to what you owe, like you got 3 days to pay up, or he gets hunting rights to go find you and kill you.
Yep. And he'll do it.
You know, things are going well. Farah is getting antsy. They've been there for hours. So in comes a water wraith, and she is like, listen, like we have no food. There's no fish in our lakes and ponds. Like I have nothing to give you. And Tamlin's like, you know what? I'm sorry that you're poor. Like that sucks. But also like you got to figure it out. You got 3 days, like, you know, the rules. So Farah immediately is just pissed off because she's like, why the heck do we need these fish? Like, we have so much stuff. And like, I've been hungry before. What are you even doing? Like, you know, I was starving when I got here. And he's like, sorry, like, this is how it's done. And she's like, no, we're not doing that. And so she chases after the water wraith, gives her basically the jewelry off of her back, and is like, use this money to, you know, pay off what you owe, go buy yourself some food. Like it's on me, no worries. Water wraith is like, you know what? I owe you one. We're not going to forget this debt. Tamlin's pissed at dinner.
He's so mad.
He's like, how dare you undermine me?
How dare you? How could you? And Lucian's just like, guys, please, mom and dad, can we not fight? And so Farah is like, Lucian, like, join my side. You know I'm right. You know he's wrong. Like, stand up to him. So she's like hardcore staring at Lucian with this thought in her mind of like, stand up to him. Like, where's your spine? And she loses her temper so much that she accidentally slips into Lucian's mind. Like how Reese can slip into people's minds.
Like, who did that come from? That's weird.
Yeah, she is shook that happens. She is so shook. She like returns to her mind shortly after, and where her hands were like on the table, there are burn marks from her hands too, because she also like her hands caught fire with her powers. And she is like, I hope no one notices that happened. Like, I am embarrassed and ashamed. And they told me that it's bad to have these powers. So she just goes to her room. Oh, because her and Tamlin have separate rooms, by the way.
Yeah, they don't sleep in the same rooms. Even though he sleeps in her bed every single night, he's like, yeah, you actually can't come to my rooms. I really strongly believe it's because he has side hoes, and nobody can convince me otherwise that
no, he would
not fucking getting it while he was under the mountain like every single day. Like,
yeah, he's weak. He's so weak. And he's very much like, woe is me, like poor
like, you go without sex.
Yeah, like, oh, my betrothed, my beloved, she's rotting in a cell and she can't come please me in the bedroom. Yeah. So I need
pathetic is what he is.
He's disgusting.
A piece of trash. Also,
yeah,
it's like, you know, something that really grinds my gears is that in the first book, you know, he told Farah, he's like, I would never take away someone's sole provider of food and like not replace it. And then like the water wraith is like, we don't have fish. He's like, that's not my problem.
Yeah, and he's like, sorry, gonna have to kill you in 3 days. Sorry.
Like, okay, dog.
Them's the rules. So Farah and Tamlin had their big fight about the tithe. Like they were both mad, and Farah is feeling guilty up in her room, even though she shouldn't because she's right. But she goes and she's like, goes to the study to apologize to him. At this point, we need to mention Farah, because she's been so depressed, she has not been able to paint since she's returned home. She is also freaking out because when she gets married to Tamlin, she's like, what will they call me? Will they call me High Lady? And Tamlin's like, no, there's no such thing as a High Lady. And like that, like, part of her, she says, like, part of her that used to exist is like angry at that she won't be his equal, but she also is super relieved because of how like unworthy and guilty she's feeling.
She's like, yeah, I'm not worth it. Absolutely.
Yeah, she's like, how would I be fit to like have that title? Okay, so she's got all this going through her head. And when she shows up to Tamlin's study to apologize, it turns out he's been wanting to apologize to her too. He was also feeling bad, so he got her a present. And so she's about to open this present, and in her mind she's like, don't let it be a crown. Like I can't like handle if it's a crown, that'll freak me out. But it's a traveling painting set,
which is worse.
Which is worse. So she is like trying to like fake her happiness. She's like, great, this is perfect.
I love
And Tamlin's
it.
like, you don't like it. And she's like, no, it's not that. It's just that I'm depressed. I'm horribly depressed. And so she's like, Tamlin, I can't go anywhere without the sentries following me around. I can't do anything. I'm being like drowned, and you might as well be holding my head under the water. Now, any rational, normal, loving partner would hear this and be like,
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. Like, I never want you to feel that way. What does Tamlin do? He explodes in like this horrible burst of power and anger. It literally shatters everything around them in the study. Luckily, Feyre has these powers from the High Lords, so she sends out a protective shield around herself, or she would have been like hurt, genuinely.
Like, yeah, not well.
Yeah, so she shields herself from him. She's like, what just happened? It was such an instinct, she didn't even know she did it. But like, she looks up, she sees there's paint running down the walls, everything is shattered and splintered around her. And Tamlin is immediately like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Like, Feyre, please, I'm sorry.
Like, you just make me so crazy.
Yeah, and he's like trying to get to her, but she has this shield up that she doesn't know is up. But he's like stopped by this shield, and he's immediately like even more manipulative. He's like, oh, that's so hurtful that you would shield yourself from me at a time like this when I just tried to blast you across the wall.
It's like that sound on TikTok right now from the Heathers from like Jamie Moscato. Like, that's literally what happened in the
Veronica,
study.
open the door,
Veronica,
please.
yeah.
Let's not fight anymore.
Yeah, I'm just like, ooh, crazy.
Yeah, it is domestic abuser 101. So Feyre, she is so like shooketh. Like, she's surprised that he reacted like that. 1, 2, she's surprised that she was able to shield herself. She didn't know she could do that. And so she is broken down by him. She's so in love with him. She lets him in to her shield, and he like holds her, and he's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, I could feel his apology in every thrust he made.
Oh God.
It's disgusting, guys. It is so like,
yeah, she's like, the only way we know how to communicate is with our bodies. And it's like, that's an issue, dog.
Like, bestie, babes.
That's not good.
If any of you who are listening think this sounds familiar or sounds reasonable, it's not.
And you need to reevaluate where we're at in life.
Yeah. Reach out, please. Reach out to a friend if you're going through this. It's not good. So Feyre, she
days
goes
go
to
by.
sleep.
Like, she's just like, whatever.
Yeah, she's like, I don't care anymore. Like, she's given up.
She's not eating at this point. Sleeping till like 4 p.m, like getting at least maybe 1 meal a day. That's it, whatever. So 1 month rolls around. Guess he's back again. It's Reese, and shows up middle of the morning and starts arguing with Tamlin out in the hallway, and it's just like, no, I'm fucking taking her back here, like, you're insane. And so Feyre hears them arguing in the hallway. She comes out, and immediately Reese is like, did y'all run out of food here? Like, what is happening? Like, she
looks like a skeleton,
skin and bones, like looks like she has died in her sleep 12 years ago. And is like, no, let's let's go. We're going back to the night court. Go get your shit. Let's go. And so she goes into her room, puts on her night court attire, immediately like falls off of her. And she's like, oh, that's weird.
She's like, I've lost some weight.
Huh. Like, not even acknowledging that, like, she is barely functioning human being right now. Anyway,
like,
so
it's fine. I deserve it. I deserve worse.
So we take her back to the night court, and immediately she's just shut down, like not a thought in this girl's head right now. And Reese keeps trying to rile her up. He knows something is wrong, like she's not right. Keeps trying to get her to play with him, and he's like, literally, just like, tell me what I need to do to help you. He's like, this is not right. Like, do you not understand? Like, this isn't right. He's like, how can you live like this? How can you let him treat you like this? He's like, let me help you. And she's like, no, like, why are you being a dick? What are you even talking about? Tamlin loves me.
Yeah, she's like, you're Tamlin's enemy, so that makes you mine. And he's like, does it? Am I? And she's like, wait, I don't know.
And so she basically just spends her entire time there doing absolutely nothing, which is good for her little soul. It definitely gives her a moment to recharge. And she even acknowledges that. She's like, I love being here because I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, and she can read now.
That's an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So she practices her shielding. She is proficient at reading. She can get through books. And so it gets to the point where Reese is like, if you ever, just need to come here so you don't literally pass away, like, just let me know and you can do that. And obviously he's like, do you want to work with me? Like, what do you need? And she's like, no, I'm not going to work with you. Like, are you crazy? You're Tamlin's enemy. And he's like, he keeps saying that, but am I?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, you are, right? Makes sense.
Right? You would tell me if we're not enemies, right?
I think at this point she's really starting to, kind of understand, like, maybe things aren't quite right. And I think she knows deep down that they're not, but she is just so blinded by love that she is like, no, it's my fault that Tamlin's, acting out. It's on me because of how I am.
Yeah, and because she thinks that all of Tamlin's reactions to her actions are justified. And of course they're not. But like she's genuinely manipulated by this man, and like whether he's meaning to or not, like he's treating her like dirt.
Mm-hmm. So she's like, take me back home, it's time to go back to the spring court. He drops her off and he is like, Feyre, you need to fight this. He's like, you are no one's plaything, like you are your own person, like you need to fight this because you are wasting away. And she's basically like, buzz off, I don't care. So she gets back in and things have gotten worse. Like she is on lockdown now.
Yeah because before she had like gone back to the night court, Tamlin had been trying, quote unquote,
after he exploded the room.
Yeah, after he exploded the room, he was like, okay, I'll try to make there like be less guards around you and stuff. But like when she comes back from the night court this time, like they're back in full force. So she's just kind of going through the motions, like sometimes passing. She's not doing anything. She's not accomplishing anything. She's full on clinically depressed. She at one point is like, she overhears a conversation between Ianthe, Tamlin, and Lucien. And they're talking about her powers and like whether or not she should be training them. And Lucien is like trying to fight for Feyre. And he's like, I think it could be a good idea. Like we need to like help her like figure all of this out. And Tamlin is like, no, absolutely not. And Ianthe is like backing Tamlin up. And she's saying, we need to keep Feyre's powers a secret because some enemy high lord could find out she's powerful and then steal her away for breeding purposes. And she's like, Reese would be evil enough to
like
do
what
that.
We're doing.
Yeah, like what they're doing. But Ianthe is like, yeah, Reese is so evil. He would kidnap her and force her to bear offspring. And Feyre's like, I've heard enough. So she just literally goes back to sleep. And so the next morning she sees Tamlin and Lucien are about to leave. And she's like, where are you going? And they tell her there's a conflict on the western sea border, which is nearest to Hybern, which when she was at the night court the first time, Reese had told her about like the threat of war that loomed because the king of Hybern had sent Amarantha as an experiment, and like it was just the beginning. So Feyre knows like there's shit going on, but Tamlin and Lucien aren't telling her anything. And like Reese hasn't told her much because she hasn't agreed to work with him. So Feyre is like, tell me what's going on. I'm coming with you. And Tamlin's like, no, you're not. So she tries to follow him out the door and walks into like an invisible force field. Tamlin has warded her inside the house. He's trapped her.
This whole chapter makes me like sick to my stomach.
Oh, it is heart-wrenching. So Feyre's instantly triggered, instantly feels like she's back in her dungeon cell under the mountain, and Lucian's like it's not
Chin
worth
up,
it.
like we'll get through it.
Yeah, but then he just like turns her back on her and leaves too. So Feyre, having all of these powers that only rear their heads whenever she's extremely emotional, absolutely spirals into a pit of despair, sends out this like giant like
Plume of darkness.
yeah, just a cloud of complete pitch black and like fire on the inside. And so all the servants are horrified and so scared. And so Feyre is like, she's just kind of hearing bits and pieces of what's going on. Like she is having a full blown like panic attack.
She's like, maybe it'll kill me and it'll be fine.
Yeah, she's like, fingers crossed. Like at this point, like I have nothing, because the man that she loves has just trapped her inside this home as like a prison cell.
And the way Sarah J Maas wrote this entire thing, like it is heart-wrenching if you've ever experienced, anxiety or panic or whatever. Like reading that and putting yourself in Feyre's shoes, it just is such a triggering experience, because you feel like you're trapped in there with her, and it's like you feel the betrayal, you feel her heartbreak, because she's up until this point thought like she was the problem and whatever. And I think at this point in time she's like, Tamlin betrayed me, like he just left me here.
Yeah, and without feeling remorseful, he didn't even like turn around and look at her. He just kept walking. And so she is feeling so heartbroken. It's horrible. And Tabby was saying like she listened to that part on the audiobook at one point, and you can hear like the voice actor does a really good job of like portraying the emotion. So I haven't listened to it, but now
it is haunting.
Wow. Oh, it's haunting enough just to read it.
Yeah.
So Feyre's kind of hearing bits and pieces of what's going on outside of her episode, her breakdown. And she's like scooped up into the arms of someone. She can tell it's a woman just by like the feel of the body against her. And Alice tells this person that scooped her up to please take care of her, which coming from Alice, like that means so much, because Alice has been like a nurturing, like motherly figure to Feyre throughout the entire first book.
Who has seen her like wasting away this entire time she's back home.
Yeah, and Alice is, not only does she care for Feyre personally, but she also feels extremely indebted to her because of what she did under the mountain. And like Alice has been reunited with her nephews since Amarantha's reign has ended. Like Alice she feels so indebted to Feyre and cares for Feyre so much. So that moment is like really touching. So it turns out the person who has scooped her up is Morrigan, Rhys's cousin from the Night Court. So she takes Feyre somewhere outside of Spring Court territory, and then Rhys winnows her the rest of the way to the Night Court.
What was so touching to me about that part was that the entire time Moore was carrying her, Feyre was freaking out. Like they had to go under a tunnel to, go into the summer court to avoid war between, Spring Court and the Night Court. Yeah. But the entire time, like she's holding her and carrying her, she's just repeating like, you're free, you're out of there, like you're not trapped here anymore. I don't know. I think it's just a really special moment between Moore and Feyre, because Moore didn't have to do that. Like Moore barely knows Feyre. They didn't necessarily, leave off on good terms by any means.
Yeah.
And so, for her to do that for her was a lot.
Yeah, and we'll see later on why Moore is so like, I mean, obviously she cares about Feyre at this point, and we'll learn that later on, but she's also empathetic to Feyre's situation of feeling trapped and, like not like she has useless. Useless, like powerless. So she is very empathetic to Feyre's situation.
Yes, and so we get to, Feyre, she wakes up basically in nothing but sunlight and open space, and she feels relaxed. She's slept. She is a little disoriented, doesn't know where she is. She wakes up and sees that Reese is there and that she is back in the night court and that he's rescued her. And basically he explains, we had to do everything by the book. Like, I was not going to leave you there, but if you want to go back, just let me know. I will take you back. But if you don't want to, like, you have a home here, basically. So he knows, like, obviously the situation there is dire. It's not good. And so he's like, you know what, get some sleep, rest here. I have some business to attend to in the other parts of my court. And she's like, don't leave me here. Like, just take me with you. She's like, Tamlin would never take me with him. Like, please just take me with you. And Reese is like, of course, I'm not going to leave you here. He's like, however, what you see, like, you cannot tell anybody because this is like a very special part of my court. No one knows about it. And so she's like, yep, I promise, like, I will not tell anybody. He's like, awesome. Then we are going to Valaris, the city of Starlight. And so this brings us to the next part, which is the House of Wind.
Yeah, so Reese has told Feyre about this city they're about to go to. He's telling her it's been guarded for 5,000 years. Like, nobody knows about it except for people in the night court. And Feyre is like, well, that means, like, if my math is right, that means that Amarantha did not destroy this city.
I can't read, but
now I can't read, but I know that 50 years is less than 5,000. And so she is like, that's crazy. Like, that doesn't even make sense to her, because at the Spring Court, like, they've been rebuilding, like, in the aftermath of Amarantha, every city has been destroyed. So she's like not even able to fathom this. So Reese has winnowed them into a townhouse that he tells her is like it's one of his homes in the city of Valaris. And while he's explaining all this to her, some people arrive outside the house and are like yelling to be let in. And Feyre's like, what is going on?
What is this?
She's like a little bit alarmed, but he's like, no, those are members of my what'd you say?
So those are my pet dogs.
Those are my pet dogs. Yeah, so those are Reese's pets. And he's like, you can choose to like meet them now if you want. But Feyre's like, no, like, I'm wiped, I'm scared. And so she just goes upstairs and she just takes a little nappy nap. When she wakes up, though, Reese is like offering to give her a tour of the city. So he's taking her around town. He's explaining how this place has been a secret and like his ancestors had it like be a secret when they founded it. They wanted it to be a place of peace. And so he gets to like this point of the city and it's called the Rainbow of Valaris. And so this place is like basically the artist's quarter. So there's like people like who do music and dancing and painting. And so Feyre sees this store and it's full of like painting supplies and art. And she is just, she hates the sight of it because it just breaks her heart. Like, she can't paint anymore. So that one tie that she had left to like joy and humanity is gone. And so it just makes her depressed. So she tells Reese she wants to go home. She's like angry. She's feeling like, how could Reese like do this? How could he not open this place up as a sanctuary? She thinks that it's selfish of him that he kept this secret while all the other cities in Prythian were suffering. And so she is having a really hard time like justifying that in her mind.
Yes. And so Reese is like, my people are faultless, like they didn't do anything, this was 100% my choice. And he talks about it a little bit later as well, what exactly he did have to sacrifice for the sake of this city. And she's like, yeah, you're absolutely right, it's not their fault. She's like, I'm just tired, let's do this dinner. And he was like, awesome, let me give you a little recap on who's going to be here, going over Cassian and Azriel more. And then he's like, and also Amren, who is this insanely powerful creature who looks like high fae but is not high fae. And he's like, basically like, don't trifle with Amren, like leave her alone. And Pharaoh's like, you know what, like maybe I deserve to be ended by a creature like Amren. And Reese is like, oh, I think not. Grabs her and he's like, don't you ever ever think anything like that again. He was like, not for one damn moment do you think like that. And so I think that's a big moment for Feyre. No one's told her like, hey, you're worth something. And so she's like, oh, okay, like, sure.
And she can not only see how much like he cares in that moment, but she can feel it because this bond between them, she is so like taken aback by how passionate he is about like her being worth something. As she's looking into his eyes, she shifts into his mind accidentally again and sees from his eyes like she did with Lucian earlier when she lost her temper.
And so she can see what is like a shell of a woman she's become, like just skin and bones and circles under her eyes, and she didn't realize like how weak she looked.
She's like, wow, I look horrible.
Like and bad.
So Rhys is a little taken aback too. He's like, how'd you get past my mental shields? And she's like, I don't know, it was an accident. And so he's explaining to her that like this power, the people who are able to slip into each other's minds like that are called Daemati, and there are not very many of them. It's a very rare gift, but he's explaining that she also has this gift, most likely because it's from his bit of power that brought her back to life.
Yes. And so they get ready for dinner. She's decided, since Tamlin's court dresses up, she needs to dress up because she's not sure what to expect. Rhys is like, hey, I have to fly you up here, actually. And she's like, absolutely not. He's like, well, you can either, fly with me or climb up 10,000 steps. And I'm sure not doing that. And so ends up flying her up to what's called the House of Wind. It's his second home in Belarus. So they get there and she's looking at the expanse of what this city is. She's absolutely just amazed that something like this even exists, and how sad it is that she let Tamlin not let her see any parts of his court, never travel to any other parts of his court. And so she had no idea how expansive Prythian was and what all it entails. And so they end up playing this game, a thought for a thought. Basically, Rhys told her a little bit about himself and why he did the things that he did, what's on his mind. And so again, it's just a good opportunity for Feyre to kind of break down another wall that she's built up, and basically admits to him, like, I think that I am lonely and I'm hopeless, and I let myself fall in love with the first thing that showed me any sort of kindness, and I let myself be caged in. And so again, just another moment for her to start really getting some of that self-realization that she did let Tamlin kind of run her life, and that she let him put her in a cage, and that she is ready to take that next step and kind of start getting her own life back.
Yeah, she like feels that way. She feels like I would have fallen in love with the first thing that showed me attention. But I do think that is a bit harsh on her. I mean, she is obviously feeling really insecure lately, but I do think she's a bit harsh on herself there, because Tamlin is what she needed. She needed safety and security, and she will realize that later. But it does break my heart that she feels that way in that moment. And she's obviously confused, like, because she feels so betrayed by Tamlin, and also blindsided by the fact that he locked her in the house. She's like, who could have seen this coming? And we're like, all of us,
girl.
Anyway, that does break my heart for her in that moment. But they have dinner together. Like you said, she had dressed up because at the spring court everything was very formal and by the book, and she arrives at this dinner, and I mean, Moore is dressed up too, but that's just because Moore likes to look good. So is Rhys, but like Cassian and Azriel are kind of more dressed down. I can't remember if it talked about Amren's outfit. She probably was wearing something nice. She
came in later, but I mean, Cassie and Azriel, they're first people that she meets in the House of Wind, and she turns around and she's like, holy cow, like, I guess everyone is just freaking gorgeous here. Crazy.
Yeah, she's like, oh, like, okay,
Cool. And so
Wow.
Cassian like keeps calling Reese brother, and she's like, are you guys like related? And he's like, no, like we're brothers in a sense that like all bastards are brothers. And so Cassian, we find out, is like the bastard of this like laundress for an Illyrian war camp, and he is the head of Reese's armies. And then Azriel is his spy keeper, who, you know, keeps all the secrets and heads off all his spy work networks and stuff. And so she starts, you know, seeing how the inner circle really kind of works together and what they all do for him, but also how he treats them like family. And even though they do work for him, they are still like their own people.
Yeah, it's very much a family, and it's very casual, and it's like they work for Reese, but it's out of a sense of loyalty and duty and family rather than
Necessity and fear.
like Lucian was like basically at that point at the beginning of this book, he was like loyal to Tamlin, but like because he was a coward, like
He's scared of him.
yeah, if any one of the members of Reese's inner circle disagreed with Reese, they would tell him. And so Feyre's realizing like this is a much different dynamic than what was going on in the Spring Court. And so she is getting to know like the backstory of everyone. They're asking questions about her too. And she explains her like history as a human before she was like under the mountain. She learns that basically she can tell that there's like some weird tension between Mor and Azriel. She's noticing that like Azriel kind of looks at Mor like he's into her, and Mor like pretends not to notice. And so Farah's like,
that's weird.
Interesting. She also notices that Cassian is like super, like he's super outgoing. He'll say whatever's on his mind, whether or not it's offensive. She's like getting to know their personalities. And so at the end of the dinner, she tells Reese, I will work with you guys. And they're all like, oh, like I didn't realize this was an interview. And so even Reese is a little bit surprised. She can feel like a flicker of like pleasant surprise down their bond that they share. So Reese is like, well, that's good though, because we have a lot to accomplish. So he explains to the rest of the inner circle what he's already told Feyre, because he told Feyre already because he like needed her to get on board. But he explains the war, the King of Hybern, how he's like got something like stirring. They don't know what at this point, but he's like, we need to know like actually at this point apparently he knows that they're resurrecting Jurian.
Yeah.
So Jurian, if you recall, is the human who led in the war
rebellion
against the king. So he led the rebellion, and he died because he and Amarantha got into it over her sister, because Jurian had like pretended to like love her sister and then killed her. Anyway, so he's like, the king is resurrecting Jurian to lead this army, and they're all like, Jurian, and Feyre's like, oh wait, like what's the tea?
What's a Jurian?
What's a Jurian? And so they explain everything to Feyre, who like his significance. And Reese is like so they're like, there's no way you can't resurrect someone from just like his bone and his eyeball, because Amarantha wore his bone on a necklace and his eye in a ring. And he's like, the only way we'll know for sure is by talking to the bone carver. And Feyre's like, that sounds scary. Who's that? And they're like, he lives in the prison. And Feyre's like, a prison? I'm not interested in going into a prison. That triggers my PTSD. But Reese is like, I'm sorry, it has to be you and me, because like the bone carver's interested in you specifically, Feyre. And she's like, okay, I'll do it. Like, how bad can it be? And
like pretty bad. All right, so cut to Feyre and Reese leaving the dinner. He flies her back to the townhome, and Feyre is, you know, basically asking him, what did you do to keep Valaris a secret? And Reese is like, you know what I did. And she's like, oh yeah, you know, he was Amarantha's whore. He basically gave himself away to protect the secrets of this city. and she knows that, he's not a monster, but he was willing to become one to protect his people. So they get back home. Feyre has like her recurring nightmare. She wakes up, just screaming her head off. And Rhys is there waking her up like, hey, you need to stop. Like, what's going on? And so
Snap out of it.
Snap out of it. So she races to the bathroom, throws up like she always does. And Rhys is right there, basically comforts her through it, walks her through it. She is like throwing up fire. She's got talons, like her powers are out of control. And so he's trying to like talk her off a cliff basically, and like tells her
is more than Tamlin ever did. He always pretended to just like, be asleep still.
Yeah, Rhys like heard her from down the hall and was like, whoa, yeah, that's not good. But basically rubs her back, and he explains, he has nightmares too. He has the same ones every night. And that, it doesn't get better, but they can get through it together basically. And that, there are ways for her to cope, and that it's something that, he's willing to help her with. And so again, just kind of a bonding moment between the two of them. Next morning, they wake up to go to the bone carver. They do a lot of traveling. They're both in like their fighting leathers, ready for battle. They get to the entrance, and Feyre realizes, oh, hey, I have to go underground. Like, ain't no way that's happening. And so she basically freaks out, can't do it. And she's like, I need to go back home. Like, I can't do this. So Rhys takes her back home. She ends up just going to bed, sleeps the rest of the day. She again just is spiraling. She's like, I'm useless, whatever. Wakes up, and old Amren standing at the end of her bed, and is basically, when I think of Amren, I think of Edna Mode from
Oh my god, yes. Tiny, short black bob. Absolutely.
And she's basically like, girl, get it together. Like, I'm going to give you this amulet. It is what I used when I escaped the prison the first time around. She's like, and if you wear it, you will be able to get out of there. And so Feyre has like this newfound sense of like confidence in herself. And she's like, yes, I can do this. If I have this amulet is going to protect me, and I'll be able to leave, and it'll be fine. And so she goes back to the bone carver with Rhys, and he explains to her that basically it's like its own little territory, possibly even an eighth court at one point in time, and that it falls under his jurisdiction. And so they're going to go travel under the mountain. So they get under there, they're walking through this prison, and they come across this giant like gate of bones, and immediately walking in, she hears this creepy voice, and she sees what looks to be like a little boy who has dark hair, bright blue eyes, and is based but talking like he is like 1,000 years old. It's very disconcerting.
She's like, you're like very off-putting. Has anyone ever told you that before?
Extremely creepy. And Rhys had told her like he will appear to everybody a little differently. He does not appear to everybody the same way. And so whatever Rhys was seeing was different than what she was seeing. And basically, like, she had been given the script, like a question for a question, and he's like, give me something too. And so Rhys pulls out this calf bone, and he was like, this is the bone from the Middengard worm, and that killed the Middengard worm in the first trial that Feyre had. And so that was like their trading token essentially. But Feyre was able to exchange questions for, what was going to be happening, what the cauldron was, what Hybern was after. But in exchange, the bone carver was like, I want to know what happened when you died. And Feyre is like, not expecting that. He kept asking, like, what did you see? What was there? Did you, expect to go anywhere after you died? And she wants to know, like, where does this guy want to go? Like, why does he want to know so badly what's on the other side? And ends up, kind of spilling her guts, and is like, yeah, I wanted to die, but then when I actually did die, I was like, well, maybe I don't want to die.
She offered up some pretty raw truths. Like, she was peeled raw at this moment, and Rhys is there just like,
he's like, oh shit,
trying not to listen, because like
he's like getting ready to cry in the corner. He's like, god damn it, I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, like Rhys doesn't like to hear it. Feyre can tell he's tense, but like the bone carver is intrigued. Like, this is what he wants to hear.
Yes.
So she does. So, okay, Rhys is distraught. Feyre's like, it's fine. Honestly, I needed to vent this to someone. So I don't think she really minds like saying it out loud at this point. So the bone carver tells them that there's a cauldron, the cauldron that created the world, basically. And in order to make the cauldron less powerful, at some point, the feet that the cauldron rests on, there's 3 of them, had been severed from the main part. But those feet were hidden in temples. And now there's been attacks going on at all the temples. And so they know that like whoever has the cauldron has been getting these like feet back for the cauldron, so it has its full power. And so if the cauldron is all in one piece, Jerian can be resurrected from that. And so the bone carver tells them there is something called the Book of Breathings, and it was basically created to nullify the power of the cauldron. But there's 2 halves. One's in possession of the Fae people, one's in possession by the mortal human people. And only someone who has been made can read from this book and render the cauldron's power like powerless.
And who was just made into a fae?
Who was made, you might ask? It's our bestie, Farah. So they get basically all the information they need from the bone carver, and Reese is like, I cannot listen to another horrible, depressing thing in exchange for more information. So they're leaving, and as they're leaving, the bone carver's like, Farah, I'm gonna carve your death into this bone that you brought me. Like, thank you so much for this gift.
I love it.
It's perfect.
Yes. So they return from the prison. They go back home. They tell the inner circle everything that they learned. She basically is like, you know, we'll need to find the second half of this Book of Breathings. We'll have to go to the summer court. So Reese writes up like this whole letter to them, blah, blah, blah. He's like, but, you know, before we do that, we need to make sure that you can actually like find this stuff, that you can actually track down and retrieve what we need you to. And so he was explaining that because Farah contains a little bit of power from all the 7 High Lords, she basically has like 7 fingerprints basically, and should potentially be able to become like their essence and like find things that had previously belonged to them. And so to test this theory, he's like, you know where we're going? We're going to the Weavers. And everyone's like, absolutely not. We're not going.
Everyone's like, please, God, no.
Don't do that. Like, are you stupid? And Faye was like, again, you know, why are we calling people all these silly names? Like, whatever. And he's like, nope, we're gonna go. And he's like, and also I'm gonna make you my emissary to the human realm. One more name for you. And so they go the next day. He's like, get up, we're going to the Weaver's house. And so he helps her like get dressed. A really nice moment between them. He's on his knees before her. I was like, good for you.
I know. She's like kind of enjoying the sight of it.
I really enjoyed that myself. So anyway, puts her in fighting leathers, tells her you can only take this knife because she can sense if something new comes into her home, and like drops her off in the middle of the woods. So they're getting this game plan together. She is nervous. She is scared. And so to kind of distract her, he starts teasing her, kind of flirts with her, gets her pissed off, but also she wants him. And so Reese is like, good, now that you're in a great mindset, like, let's freaking do it. Disappears just off the face of the earth. And he's like, good luck. Here is this tiny little creepy cabin. Looks, you know, not suspicious, looks super nice from the outside. Gets in there, there's a nice lady singing in there. She's beautiful from the backside. She's weaving her stuff, and Farrah's like, yeah, I'll just be in and out of here super quick, no big deal. And so she's sneaking around, and the lady is singing this creepy song, like super creepy. We'll talk about it later. I've got some theories about it. Anyway, she is like searching around. Finally, something like kind of catches like her attention. She hears something and she's like, yep, that's it. That's what I need. That's what I came for. Walks over, it's a ring. And she's like, yeah, it makes sense that Reese would have me grab a ring. Second she picks it up, this lady stops singing, stops doing what she's doing. And Farrah's like, oh, like that's
and I
and so immediately like starts sneaking on back to the door snick shut, locks from the outside, door handle's gone, and she's like, that's probably not good. Goes to the window, no window latch, she is stuck in there. Lady's like, who is in my house? Who is this? Turns around, freaking something from your nightmares is what this lady is. Like, she's blind. She's blind, first of all. She can only smell people. That's and she hears really well. That's how she knew Feyre was in there.
Gross.
And yeah, hate that. Anyway, her face is like caved in. She's got no eyes. Like she's basically molding from the inside out, and it's disgusting. And so Feyre is panicking, and she's like, "What am I going to do?" She stops, and she's like, "Nope, I'm a freaking wolf. Like I'm going to get out of here." She's like, "You know how I'm going to get out of here? I'm going to climb up this chimney." Makes sense. Started climbing up this chimney, immediately realizes there is like freaking people grease and hair and bones in this chimney, and she is full on having a panic attack and is like, I'm going to die in this chimney. This lady's gonna pull me down and freaking gnaw on my toe bones. Like that is the end of me.
Not the toe bones.
So she's having an absolute time in the chimney, realizes she's like, you know what, I'm freaking strong, like I can get out of here. Remembers, you know, she's a godsend to man itself, punches a hole in the chimney, knocks that bad dad out off the chimney, whatever, the weaver.
She like takes a brick and throws it at her face,
smashes her face in, climbs up the chimney. She is scampering across the roof through the trees. The weaver is freaking out, like upset that somebody has stolen from her. And so she finds Rhys. Rhys is like, dude, what did you do? And she's like, get me the fuck out of here.
Covered in her like
covered in people grease and hair.
Yeah.
And they get back to the House of Wind. They winnow back in, and everyone is like, bro, what happened?
Yeah. And Amren's like, Feyre, you smell like barbecue.
Delicious.
So Feyre, like, she's like, I got the stupid ring, like, fuck you for that stupid like thing that you just did. And she just wants a bath. So Rhys winnows her back to the townhouse with a bath going. And he's like, Feyre, like, let's do a little exercise. You try to get past my shields. And Feyre's like, no. And he's like, okay, a little incentive for you. I'll tell you why I hate Ianthe so much. If you get past my shields, like, you can see it in my brain. And Feyre's like, she tries her best, but she can't get past his shields. But he's like, okay, since you tried. So he shows Feyre a memory.
For you.
Yeah. Just a little morsel. And he shows Feyre this memory. Ianthe had like tried to seduce Rhys. This was like 100 years ago. But she was like lying naked on his bed when he got to his room, and he was like, get out. And she was like, no, we could be so powerful together. And he's like, I said get out. And Ianthe had like reached for his unmentionables. Like she was just about to
feel my mana, pop a feel.
Yeah. So he like stopped her hand with his mind powers, stopped it, and like broke her hand and was like, do not touch me. Do not touch a man in my court. Like, get out. You're disgusting. Disgusting. Yeah. So he showed Feyre that memory and like leaves her with that. And Feyre, like, while she's alone, she's like piecing together like, oh man, like, what if that's why Lucien hates her? Like, what if she did that to Lucien? What if she's doing that now to Tamlin? Like, now that I'm not there? And she's like, oh, I can't think about that. And she also is like, oh my gosh, like the fact that Rhys did what Ianthe was trying to get him to do. Rhys did that with Amarantha to protect his people and to protect Valaris. And so she's realizing like this man like gave up so much of himself for his people. And she had never really thought of it that way before. So the Book of Breathings that the Bone Carver had described is in two halves, like we talked about. So the half that's possessed by the human people is possessed by the mortal queens of the human realm. So the inner circle has to make connections to them. The only humans Feyre can trust with this are her sisters, obviously. So she's like, we need to go to my family's home. I need to talk to Nesta and Elaine, and we need to just like kind of make this like an embassy of sorts to like have meetings with these mortal queens. And so Rhys, Cassian, and Azriel fly Feyre there. And when Feyre arrives, like this servant opens the door, and she like Feyre has her hood up to like conceal her fae ears, but the servant is like clearly something is off about you. She's like, I don't trust you. But Elaine comes to the door and she's like, Farah, oh my God, like I missed you. And the servant's like, hey, Elaine.
Bella, where the hell have you been, Loca?
Bella, where have you been, Loca? Dead, brought back to life, and traumatized. What about you, bestie? So Elaine is like, come in. And Nesta is like a little bit off put, but she's like, whatever. So when they're alone, Farah and her sisters, she takes down her hood and they're like, gasp. Oh my God, you're a high fae. And Farah explains everything that happened. She explains the impending war and like what they need from her sisters. Like they need like an embassy in the human realms. And Nesta's like, no, absolutely not. We won't do it. And Elaine can't risk it because she's engaged to a mortal lord's son who they're completely against the fae. Like they hunt fae down in the human realm. So she's like, we cannot risk this. We cannot risk our social standing. Absolutely not. And Elaine is like, no, like we need to hear them out. Like there won't be like anything to protect if the King of Hybern like tears down this wall and everything gets like basically
incinerated and torn apart.
Yeah, because like the threat of the fae invading exists. And so Elaine's like, listen, we have to like pair up with these fae, the good fae.
Somehow Elaine is the voice of reason in this situation.
Which is surprising for a lot of reasons. It's surprising. It's a little out of character for her. But maybe that's what makes Nesta so like willing to listen, because she's like, well, Elaine doesn't normally like have opinions like this. So, okay. Anyway, Farah's like, I brought Rhys, Azriel, and Cassian. Like, let's bring them in here and we'll talk. So, also Farah asked, she's like, where's Dad? And they're like,
oh, he's
gone. He heard there's a threat above the wall, so he went to like some meeting about that. And Farah's like, okay, interesting. And we'll come back to that as well. But anyway, Farah introduces the fae to her sisters, and she like at this point they've asked all the servants to like go home. So like all this is in secret. Farah is like trying to like play like the mediator, but things are a little tense. Like Nesta's really tense, and Cassian can like tell that she doesn't like them being there, so he's trying to like prod at her. And like I think it's clear at this point Cassian like likes Nesta. Yeah, he's like, oh wow, she's feisty, I like her. But she is like turning him down, which only makes him like want to pursue it more, which is a little bit problematic, but we can talk about that later.
It'll be perfect.
They have a really awkward dinner, and Nesta's like, okay, I'm sure you guys want to stay the night, right? And Farah's like, I mean, sure. Like, yeah, that's probably for the best. So they stay up late drafting this letter to the queens, like explaining everything. And Nesta and Elaine like are preparing rooms for them. Cassian and Azriel stay in one room, and Rhys and Farah stay in the adjoining room. And Rhys is like, Farah, I gotta admit, it's really hard for me to be nice to your sisters.
They fucking suck.
They suck. And he's like, I cannot believe like how they treated you. They were horrible to you. And it's like so hard for me to pretend to like be able to like put up with that. And so they're like chatting some more. Farah also like I don't know if he straight up asked her like when her birthday was. I think he did.
He did, because he was like, yeah, you're getting you get a salary from me. Also, when's your birthday? And she's like, that's a weird change of subject, but sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because I'm sure he gives everyone birthday gifts, to be fair, like everyone in his inner
circle. He seems like the type of guy who would give like really good gifts.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's very thoughtful. So I'm in love with him. What it's fine. Anyways, so Farah's like, oh yeah, my birthday is the winter solstice, and he's like,
shut the front door.
What? Because it turns out the winter solstice is the longest night of the year. So we'll talk more about that later.
Special.
Special. We'll talk about what that makes us so special.
So anyway, the next morning, Feyre and Rhys, they go to train in the woods far away so that they can't set anything on fire. Anyway, Feyre's like, dog, you need to go somewhere else because you are distracting. Yeah. And so Rhys goes back to the house and he's like, just give me a shout if you need anything. She's like shout at the bond. He's like, yeah, or like rub it on yourself. And I was like, cool.
Certain body parts might make him come faster.
That's a double entendre. And so anyway, she's practicing, blah, blah, blah. He starts sending her little cute notes. They're passing notes back and forth, like adorable. So cute that she doesn't realize there's a freaking hulking beast behind her ready to kidnap her. So something grabs her. Who is it? It's the adder. Crazy. Oh. And he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you if you don't be quiet. And so, Feyre is struggling, blah, blah, blah. And like, all of a sudden it is pitch black out, like night bursts out of nowhere. The adder just freaks out, starts screaming. Who is it?
Because it's a little bitch.
Yeah, it is. It's such a freaking coward. How does the adder keep surviving? It's insane.
I don't know.
Who keeps Mercy alive? Yeah, honestly. He's like, let me just cry really hard. Anyway, so Rhys turns out knew something had to be stalking Feyre, and he was just waiting. And so Feyre's pissed because she's like, don't ever use me as bait again. And he's like, I didn't mean it like that. And she's like, yeah, you did. He's like, yeah, you're right, I did. And I'd do it again. And so anyway, she's pissed and like attacks him, like tackles him in the snow, learns how to winnow. And Rhys is like just flabbergasted. He's like, Feyre can winnow. This is dope. And he was so proud of her for using her powers. And she's pissed off and like, so like, take me home. Like, I want to go with someone else. Azriel's taking the adder back to the Court of Nightmares. So they end up going back home, and Rhys disappears, leaves Feyre in the foyer of the townhome. And so she's reading. He comes back in an hour later and it was like, do you want to see like what happened? Kind of like an olive branch almost, like, I know you're pissed at me, like, let me show you what was going on. And she's like, of course I want to see it. And so it shows from Rhys's point of view and Rhys's mindset, what exactly happened with the adder. Basically, the adder tells them like, the king of Hybern has a huge army as big as what it was 500 years ago, the first time the war came around, and that he has spies in like every territory, and that they are, ready to attack on Prythian and tear down the wall, essentially. Oh, so we get all this information from Azriel, from the adder, while he's torturing him. Feyre, not super fazed by it. She's like, I understand. You got to do what you got to do. Was like, does Azriel like doing this? And Rhys is like, probably. I'm like, yeah, probably. Like, Az seems like he's probably a freak. I don't know.
He's a little twisted. He's a little sadistic. But you know what? We're into it. It works for him.
Okay, anyway, so yeah, the Azriel gets all the information out of the adder. King of Hybern, he's going to attack.
Okay, so after Rhys has like showed her this information that like Azriel has like tortured out of their prisoner, then Feyre is like, you know what, like, I want to tell Tamlin, because okay, so let me start over.
Hear me out.
Okay, so Feyre is like, she heard in like Rhys's memory of them torturing the adder. She's like, Tamlin thinks that they kidnapped me. The adder's basically like, Tamlin will like do whatever it takes to like get back what's his, like implying that Tamlin thinks that Feyre was stolen from his court. And so Feyre's like, listen, I need to write a note to Tamlin. So she tells Rhys, like, mail this out for me. She writes a note for him and she's like, Tamlin, I want to thank you for everything you did for me. Like, you really, like, you loved me in a way that I needed to be loved, and I loved you too, but like, listen, I gotta go my own way. And I left. I left my go my own way. And she tells him like, I left on purpose, like it was my choice, I'm safe, I'm cared for, like don't come looking for me. like forever
Lose my
yours,
number.
XOXO, Feyre.
Gossip Girl.
And so she is pretty heartbroken that she just wrote this like letter officially telling Tamlin she's leaving. So she's like, Rhys, like, I want to see Valaris at night. It's the city of starlight. Like, let's see what it has to offer. So the entire inner circle is going to go out and have a good time. And Amren comes to Feyre's room when she's like getting ready. And she's like, oh, I have your amulet that you let me borrow. And Amren's like, oh, like there was no magic to that. I just needed you to get out of bed because you were being pathetic.
Like,
And
really
Feyre's
concerned.
like, yeah. Feyre's like, oh, okay, like a little bit rude, but
Sure.
So they go out to dinner, and Feyre, like, the food is better than anything she's ever tasted. She's like, this is amazing. And then she notices that Amren is like drinking blood for dinner, and she's
casually
like,
drinking blood.
Like, that's so gross, but okay, it makes sense because she's scary. And so half of the group wants to like go out dancing after dinner, and Rhys is like, I'm tired, actually, I think I'm just gonna walk home. So Feyre's like, yeah, I want to go home too. So they're walking together. Rhys is telling Feyre about more like of the history of the Night Court, how there was an ancient high lord that like wanted a city of peace, so they founded Valaris. And while they're talking, Feyre overhears music, and this music takes her back to when she was in her dungeon cell falling apart, but someone sent music to her to keep her sane. And so she's like, Rhys, did you send that music to me in my mind? And he's like, yeah, like you needed the strength to go on, like you needed to like be kept from shattering completely. And so she's like, that's like really thoughtful, thank you. And so he like scoops her up and they fly home. And while they're flying, she's like, oh man, like I could learn to love this. Like she's having a real moment of like, I like these people.
I love it here.
Yeah. And so she's like in her bed later that night, she's reading because she can read now. And
she's learning.
She's learning. And Rhys sent another one of those notes to her. So this note pops up and he's like, you know, like, I really could use someone to come tend to my wounds from earlier, like when you tackled me into the snow. And Feyre's like, go lick your wounds and like leave me alone. And he's like, I'd rather you lick my wounds for me.
And I was like, yeah, same.
So they flirt in the note, and then like Rhys says something like crude, so Feyre tosses it in the fire and flips it off, and like she can hear Rhys laughing, and it's just like very flirty, very cute.
Love that moment between them.
Me too.
So anyway, next day, Feyre is training with Cassian and up on the roof of the House of Wind. Azriel and Rhys are sparring nearby. Feyre, you know, for the first time in a long time, she gets a flash of inspiration for a painting she'd want to do while Rhys and Azriel are fighting. And so really kind of kickstarts like that creative part of her brain that she really just thought had died a long time ago. And she's like, oh, well, maybe it's not fully gone. And this hole in my heart is not going to kill me. So they take a break, and Cassian kind of starts asking Feyre, like, are we going to talk about, you know, what happened? Like, why are you sending this letter to Tamlin? Like, you're not going back to the spring court, like what's going on? And so basically she was like, mind your business. Like, are we going to talk about, you know, why you and Moore have this unfinished history? And he was like, yeah, that's kind of old news. Like, you are way late on that. And so she's pissed off, and Cassian's pissed off. He's like, let's take this out in the ring. And he was like, and she's like, basically like, I'm fine. Cassian's like, fine is good. And so then she starts realizing like, fine is not good. And like the stuff that Tamlin did to her was messed up. And she's starting to really realize like how messed up it actually is. And she's like, oh shit, like I was being like abused. I'm like, yeah, girl, you were. And so like this whole just like come to Jesus moment for Feyre. And she was like, he trapped me in there and he wasn't gonna let me out. And he basically like just used me until I was not helpful anymore and tossed me aside and was just like, good luck to you.
Yeah, and
And
she was like,
so
I fought for him under the
yeah,
mountain. I fought for him. I shattered for him. And whenever we had a moment alone together, he didn't try to get me out of there. He tried to fuck me. And she's like, that's horrible.
that
Like, how did I
sucks.
settle?
Yeah, and so she's having this whole moment, and like as she's punching, like punches Cassian's like bare skin, realizes she is like burnt through her gloves, burnt through his punching bags. Like, she has just gone full on like inferno. And Cassian's like, hey, it's cool. And so she's having a moment. Reese, suddenly like kind of captures her within his wings and like kind of talks her down off of this cliff and comforts her, lets her know like, stuff happens, like everyone has these times, and tries to tell her like all the different ways like darkness can like comfort her and help her and like the different uses for it, and how there's going to be bad days, but there can also be good days. And again, just another moment for them to, kind of balance each other out, kind of anchor each other, because he's been there, he understands, and all he wants to do is really, kind of help her find her own peace. And so Feyre and Cassian continue training after they've had this very nice moment together. And while they're sparring, Reese arrives, lets know Summer Court has called them back. They are ready to go. They're going to go visit them and hopefully find the Book of Breathings.
Yeah, so Reese decides that obviously he and Feyre are going to the Summer Court, and so they're also going to take Amren.
Because Cassian is banned from the Summer Court.
Yeah. So they go and they meet the High Lord, who is basically a fresh High Lord. Like, he is only like 80 years old or something, which is like ridiculously
Very
young in their world. Yeah. So his name is Tarquin. They also met They also meet Princess Cressida and Prince Varian. And so Tarquin is like, clearly he's intrigued at the fact that Feyre is now living in the Night Court, because it was such a spectacle under the mountain, like her fighting for her love for Tamlin. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions for a lot of people. And Feyre is like looking out at the view, this beautiful view, and she's hit with another painting inspiration, which, as we said, whenever she was hit with the inspiration looking at Reese and Azriel sparring, that was like the first time that she's wanted to paint. So this is only the second time she's like getting these like waves of inspiration she used to get on a regular basis. So Tarquin notices that Feyre's staring out at the beautiful view, and he's like, well, what are the most beautiful lands that you've seen? And Feyre's like, that's a trick question, isn't it? And he's like, well, what's better, being immortal or being a human? And she's like, well, I mean, why don't you tell me? And he's like, she's very much like avoiding his questions, like trying to be really tactful, and also trying to play the role of someone who's not intimidated by him. She's even kind of flirting with him a bit, because they want a favor from this man. They don't exactly know how they're going to go about getting this book. They're assuming they're going to have to steal it. So they're going to have to like earn his trust either way. But Tarquin is very much like into this. He is very intrigued by her like mysterious demeanor. And he's like, so how do you fit into the Night Court anyway? And Reese is like, well, Feyre's my emissary to the mortal lands. And Reese is like, on that note, let's talk about this war that's coming up. And Princess Cressida is like, hey, maybe like we should worry about the Spring Court, because I think Tamlin would start a war to like steal Feyre back. And Feyre is like, no, I wrote him a letter. I told him like, don't do that. I left of my own will. And Cressida is like, well, it's a good thing Tamlin respects your decisions, because it's not actually up to you, because since you're his bride, you're a High Lord's bride, the law states that like he can come claim you at any moment. And Feyre's like, oh, well, that's barbaric.
That's messed up.
Reese is like, back the fuck off. And if you tell Tamlin that Feyre's here, I'll kill you. And Tarquin's like, hey man, like, no threatening members of my court here at my dinner table. And Reese is like, it's not a threat, actually, it's a promise. And Farah's like, wow, hey guys, like, let's all calm down.
This is
It's
really
really not that
nice.
serious. Yeah. So later that afternoon, Reese shows up in Farah's room where she's staying, and he's like, pay attention to me, because she's kind of like putting him off. So he like traps her against her dresser. He like puts an arm on either side of her, trapping her there. And he's like, do anything to get that book, but do not get caught. Because Reese like wants to be Tarquin's friend. And so Farah is like, do anything? Like, what if I fucked him for it? Like, is that fine? And Reese is like, whoa. And he has like a little bit of a physical reaction to that. And they can feel like this awkward, like, power and tension between them. And Reese is like, because they can like feel this awkward power, Reese tells Farah to like light this unlit candle that's sitting on the dresser. So instead, she accidentally like douses it in water, because she's like, she thinks it's because she's so near to like the High Lord of the Summer Court. And so that's like the power that's most prominent in her right now. And so she takes that same water, because Reese is like teasing her that she can't follow instructions. So she takes that same water and like splashes him in the face with it. And he's like, it's very cute. And he's leaving. And so Farah's like, Reese, do you think Tamlin would go to war for me? And he's like, would you want him to? And she's like, no, like, it wouldn't win me back. The violence wouldn't win me back. But I would go with him if it meant like that I would save innocent lives. And Reese was like, he was like speechless at that. He was basically like, no, like, that won't happen. So later, they do go out with the summer court on like a boat ride. Or is this the boat ride?
Yeah, when they go on the pleasure barge.
Okay, yeah. So later they go out with the summer court, and Farah's asking like Tarquin, how do you keep your treasures safe from Amarantha? She's like, play it cool. And he's like, well, they were hidden away.
Don't be suspicious.
Don't be suspicious. And he's like, they were hidden away before like she took over, because we knew shit was going down. And so she's like, oh, okay, well, my dad was actually the Prince of Merchants, and like I would love to compare Fae treasures to human treasures. And so he's like, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Like, I'll show you after lunchtime tomorrow. It'll be fun. And so they're having like a little bit of a conversation and about the war, and he's like, would you fight for your mortal family, like if it comes to it? And Farah's like, yeah, I would actually. And so they're having like some bonding experience, learning that about each other. And so he now feels comfortable enough to tell Farah, like, he wants to see a version of Prithian where all Fae are created equal, because it's very much like coded, like racially coded. Like, there's the high Fae and then there's the lesser Fae. And the lesser Fae are very much like not treated as equals to the high Fae. So Tarquin is a High Lord who wants to see all of Prithian being equal. And she tells him, that is really beautiful, and it would be really easy to fall in love with you. And so Farah is like, she's having this bonding moment with Tarquin, but she looks over and sees Reese has got the princess like in his lap, and she is jealous.
You hate to see it.
She's like, I hate to see that. That makes me very jealous. And she is like, wow, I'm lonely and I'm unhappy. And then she's like, I've been that way for a long time, and I'm just now realizing that. And she's like, I miss like being wanted by someone and wanting them back. And so she thinks about all the times that like her and Reese have like this really tense, awkward like moment, but then like nothing ever happens. He never pursues her. And she's like jealous. She's like, why doesn't he pursue me like that? And she just kind of like spends the rest of the boat ride staring off in space by herself. She's like, this is depressing.
It is depressing. So yeah, the next day, like she skips breakfast, she goes straight to Tarquin, meets with him, and they're like, "Yep, let's go ahead, start checking out these treasure chests that you have here." Treasures, completely ignoring Rhysand, even though he is desperately trying to get her attention, to the point where she's like, I'm going to flirt with Tarquin a little bit, like gives him this like pretty smile, and you can tell Rhys is just like pissed. And so Tarquin takes her to see all of his treasure troves, and Feyre's admiring everything they have, stops by, sees this really pretty necklace that has black diamonds, and Tarquin's like, please take this. And she's like, nope, I won't be doing that. And he was like, yep, take it as a thank you, if you won't do it for being, a good friend and a good listener, take it, because you literally saved all of us.
He's like, you'll insult me if you don't take this necklace.
Yeah, like, okay? Take this necklace. And so then Feyre has this whole sudden like complex, because she's like, now I have to steal from this guy, and he's just being very kind to me and like genuinely just wants to be our friend. She's like, maybe I can just ask him for the book. And then she's like, no, I don't think I can. And so then Tarquin starts asking some questions, and like you can tell he's trying to kind of just feel her out, see where her and Rhys are at with everything. And she's like, dude, I can't tell you anything. Like, I can't do that. Like, quit asking, and he's like, I'm sorry, like, I'm very new to this. I'm still trying to figure out how to play the game. But like, if anything ever changes, like, be an emissary to both of our lands, be an emissary, for the night court and for the summer court. He was like, we would love to have you. And so again, just reiterates, like he would be very easy to fall in love with, but also would be a very good friend to have. And he says the same of her. And so you can see kind of a friendship budding between the two. They're on pretty good footing there. So when Feyre returns to her room, she does find Rhysand waiting for her. He is not happy and is like, like, do you like him? And she was like, are you jealous? And she's like, what about you and Cressida? Like, you have no room to talk here. And he's like, oh, so you're jealous. And so just kind of a little bit of back and forth there. And Rhys was like, yeah, you know what? I am jealous, because I will never get to have what Tarquin has, because he is neutral ground. He's never going to have to like fight for anything. Like, his family's not going to be hunted like mine was. And he's like, and yeah, it sucks. Like, I just want somebody basically who can love me for me, and that's not going to happen. And so on top of that, he's like, I'm also jealous, that you smiled at him, that you gave him attention. And he's like, I want that. And so, kind of puts them back on equal footing again, and talks to Feyre a little bit about why he saved Tarquin's life under the mountain, and, how he did see him as a very good male, and that they want the same things, and that as much as he does want to just be able to ask him for the Book of Breathings, like, he knows what they have to do. And so
because Tarquin's also super young and
very young.
So he's like, even though he knows what a good like High Lord he's going to make, it's like he just can't trust him, because he has so many influences around him right now, like, because he's basically like a little baby in the position. So he's like, we can't just ask him for it. Like, he wants
to learn.
Yeah, but like, he's like, what if he tells someone else? And so he just can't ask.
He doesn't know how to play the game well enough, essentially.
Yeah.
And so, Feyre is on the same page. She's like, yeah, I want equality for everybody. I love that as well. And so basically like asks Rhys to toast with her. And the best quote in the entire book, it's one that everybody knows. It's to the people who look at the stars and wish, Rhys, he picked up his glass, his gaze so piercing that I wondered why I bothered blushing at all for Tarquin. Rhys clinked the glass against mine, to the stars who listen and the dreams that are answered. So cute.
It's so cute.
I love it.
So
one of my favorite quotes.
It's so good. I think, yeah, that's the one everyone knows from this series for sure. So Feyre, the next few days, she has not located, like, she's trying to use her power from the summer court to locate where this book is, because it's been warded and protected with summer court magic. So she's kind of like going all over town, like trying not to look suspicious while she's doing it. But she is like out, just kind of like giving up on it. But then she sees it's low tide and there's this temple ruin out there that she hasn't noticed before. And it's like pulling at her, but she can't get close enough to like see if the book is actually there or not. So she's like, I need to know for sure. So they're like at dinner and she asks Tarquin, she's like, take me out on the town and like, let's go on a walk. And I saw this temple ruin that looks super cool and I want to go see it. And so like, he immediately is like, it's just a temple. It's just muddy and gross. And so Feyre's like, that's where it is immediately. So she goes into his mind with her like powers. And she is she's able to disguise her thoughts as his by like using his essence of the summer court power. And so she's like, she's harmless, you can trust her.
Help you.
Yeah. So she's just planting all of those thoughts in his mind. And so Rhys, Feyre, and Amren get together and they're like, okay, that's absolutely where it is. So we're gonna go tomorrow night. And so the next night comes, Feyre and Amren are like dropped off at the temple. And Rhys is like, I'm gonna patrol the skies. So he's flying.
Good luck to you guys.
Good luck. Don't die. So Feyre like channels her powers that belong to the summer court to be able to unlock the door. And immediately they feel this immense power and it makes them uncomfy. And Feyre's like listening to where the book's coming from. And so they're like following all the way there to the book. Like she's just like hearing this book. And Amren can sense it too, because apparently it's like putting out this like just immense sense of power that like dampens their own powers. So Feyre gets up to the book and the book is like asking, who are you? And Feyre's like, well, I'm Tarquin, High Lord of the Summer Court. Who are you? I'm the owner of this house.
I'm Tarquin.
So the book is like, okay, cool. So Feyre picks it up and immediately the book's like, oh, liar. And so
very dramatic.
The book is very dramatic. So the book gets pissed that she's a liar and immediately sets off a booby trap. And so water is pouring from the ocean into this building. And she and Amren are like, we gotta go. So Amren is realizing her powers are dampened by like the book being nearby. So she's having a hard time like even holding the door open for Feyre. But they're swimming, they're running, like the water is climbing to the surface. They're like running out of air, getting desperate, like trying to open this door. And then all of a sudden the door gets ripped off from the outside and it's a water wraith. And so these wraiths grab Feyre and Amren, they like drag them to safety. And the water wraith is like telling Feyre, like, our sister's debt is paid. And they just like leave them on the shore, like vomiting up water. They're not doing well. But Rhys shows up and he's like, guys, what the absolute fuck? Like, you set off every alarm in there. I had to knock out so many guards, and they're like, Rhys, like, it tried to kill us, we almost drowned. And he was like, oh, so maybe this is a conversation for later. And so he windows them home. Feyre and Amren are like hysterical. They're laughing because like they have a trauma. They almost died. They're like, wow, that was funny and pretty crazy that we're alive right now. And they're just like giggling. And Rhys is like, hey, ladies, like,
get it together.
Let's be serious. And so he's like, Feyre, open the book. So the book is like talking to Feyre. It's like, who are you? Feyre, curse breaker, blah, blah, blah. I already know who you are. So at this point, Feyre gets the book open and Amren's looking at that and she is like, that is the ancient holy tongue. Like, and Rhys is like, why do you think I wanted you to look at it? Like, I need you to decode it, because Amren is from like this ancient world that existed before Prythian did.
She came through like a rift that just appeared one day.
Yeah, like when the cauldron created the world, it like created rifts. And so these like entities could come through like timelines and universes, and like Amren just happened to get trapped here in this one. And so he's like, I'm hoping that when you decode it, you can also find whatever it is you need to get home. And so Amren is like, this means so much to her. She's like been wanting to go home for 10,000 years. Or no, longer than that. She was only in the prison for 10,000 years. So yeah, Amren's been wanting to go home for millennia. And so Feyre at this point, like this is kind of like a little like recall to like the favorite quote that happened while they're in the summer court. So Feyre lets down her mental shield a little bit to talk down to the bond to Rhys, like in her mind. And it says, I inclined my head slightly and lowered my shield, only long enough to say, to the dreams that are answered. A heartbeat later, a sensual caress trailed along my mental shields, a polite request. I let it drop, let him in, and his voice filled my head. To the huntresses who remember to reach back for those less fortunate, and water wraiths who swim very, very fast. So it's kind of like a recall to that moment they had before the summer court. And he's telling Feyre, like, it's your empathy that saved you. It's the fact that you helped that water wraith during the tithe and the spring court that saved you.
So, you know, a few days pass and they've just been kind of doing their own thing, training, whatever. So Feyre ends up going to the rooftop one day to do some reading. It's relatively warm out. She finds Rhys up there, who is just kind of skulking, and he shows her that the summer court has sent them a message, and it came in the form of blood rubies. So essentially they have like a limited amount of days to live according to the summer court. And so he's just upset because, you know, he really thought him and Tarquin would be friends, and obviously Tarquin feels betrayed because they did steal from them, and Rhys was sloppy with how they ended up getting out. And so he is just inconsolable. And so Feyre, you know, thinking back to all the times that Rhys helped her and kept reaching out and, you know, getting her out of this dark spot, she's like, I'm gonna help him, and the best way to do that is through sex. And so she's like, yeah, so you said, you know, you're giving me a salary and everything, can I use it to buy lingerie that I can send to Tarquin? Like, maybe that'll help us out of this bind. And he was like, yeah, not in the mood, dog, like, don't care. He was like, oh man, like, I was gonna invite you to come with me. And he was like, oh, okay. And so
he's like, maybe I am in the mood, actually.
Maybe I am in the mood. And so really just a lot of back and forth flirting, and it's a crutch for both of them, I think, to just feel better and make them feel almost normal, because flirting is something that normal people do, and they don't have that luxury all the time in their life. And so it gets to the point where it's like she's either taking him to this lingerie shop, or she's gonna be like, I was just kidding. Luckily Asriel, you know, comes in, saves the day, and she ends up leaving the rooftop. But as she is leaving, Rhys sends a vision down the bond of the two of them going shopping for lingerie, just her and him, and some spicy stuff happens in that lingerie shop. She ends up running into a pole, which,
yeah, you know, she was a bit distracted.
She was into it.
Yeah, she was like, oh.
Just super embarrassed, and she was like, yep, never thinking of that ever again. So a couple days later, you know, Feyre is woken up in the middle of the night to just absolute pitch black darkness pouring in through her door, and she's like, what is happening? Like, the house is shaking, like crazy stuff is happening. And so she feels a pull in her bond and kind of follows it and finds Rhys in his room, and he is having just a full-blown nightmare. Doesn't realize what's going on. His power is like out of control. So she's doing everything that she can to wake him up, and finally gets him awake. He's not sure where he's at, you know, immediately kind of pins her down to the bed, has his claws out, has his wings out, and is in like survivor mode. And so she kind of snaps him out of it, uses her own darkness to soothe his darkness, and sings him a lullaby, which is really cute.
Yeah.
And so when Rhys understands that he is dreaming, he kind of snaps out of it and clears everything off, and she can see, you know, all of his tattoos, and he's naked. That's besides the point.
I'm a child.
And she sees 2 tattoos on his knees of a mountain range with 3 stars above it. And basically it means like he will bow to no one except for his crown. And so Feyre tells him that, if he needs anything, she is there to talk. And he says, likewise. And so when she glances back, she just sees this dejected male in his bed, wings kind of hanging down. And you can tell like the nightmares that he has are just really affecting him mentally, and he feels like he is kind of losing control of reality itself, which I think also kind of helps Feyre with her healing process, because she understands like she's not the only one who's dealing with these nightmares, but is still able to like function as a normal person the next day. And so just again using each other as a way to heal the holes they have in their hearts. Yeah.
Yeah, and she also like has another like flash of wanting to paint too. She's like, oh, I could paint that. She's like, it's so beautiful. So the next day, Feyre visits Amren because Amren's just been holed up in her apartment, like trying to decode this book. Or no, like at this point, actually, she can't decode it. Sorry. She's been trying to relearn the language because it's been millennia since she used it. Yeah. So Feyre, she brought her like blood to eat because Amren's just been holed up, not eating. And Amren's like, wow, thanks. And she looks over and she like notices that the blood ruby that was sent like as a bounty on Amren's head, Amren's just using it as a paperweight. And Feyre's like, that's funny. And so Amren's like, yeah, get a load of this ruby necklace that Varian sent to soften the blow. And so Feyre's like,
you too, okay.
Is there something going on there? And Amren's like, no, not as of right now. But she's like, he can't decide if he wants me or hates me. And Feyre's like, why not both? Like, absolutely, that's kind of hot. So
we love that
Amren's
for you.
Like, you make a good point. Anyway, Feyre, she spends the next few weeks like training with Cassian and like combat and like her powers with Rhys. They're kind of just waiting to hear back from the queens. And so she's like, as this time is going by, she's learning that she is getting a soft spot for Rhys. She looks forward to their time together, and they continue to do that thing where they pass notes back and forth to get to know each other better, like whenever he has to be away. And finally, the mortal queens get back to them and they agree to meet. And so they travel to the Archeron's house, like that's their like embassy in the mortal lands. The queens winnow into the house, which everyone's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. So they're like, y'all can winnow? And the queens are like, yeah, it's a secret that the Fae taught us whenever we like had our treaty.
How handy.
And they're like, okay, interesting. So the queens are like, nice to meet y'all. And Rhys is like, this is Morgan, like from the war. And they're like, oh, flabbergasted. Yeah, because Morgan's like a war hero. So Morgan was an ally to the humans during the war, and she was friends with the mortal queens at the time. So these queens are like, oh, the Morgan? And she's like, yeah, that's me. I was best friends with your ancestors.
Great grandmothers.
Exactly. So the queens are like, okay, listen, we have no intention of protecting this little sliver of land under Prythian. We're focusing on the continent. And they're like, but there's a lot of innocent lives here. Like, don't you think that's worth something? And the queens are like, listen, like we thought about it. It's not worth our resources. And so the inner circle are like shocked, they're outraged, and they're like, you guys are cowards and you have no compassion. And the queens are like, yeah, also, we're not going to give our half of the book to you because we have heard rumors about the Night Court and you guys are, apparently you're horrible. So we're not going to give you the book. And Rhys is like, no, like, we're not horrible. And they're like, prove it. So she steps forward and she says, like, you guys know me. I am the Morrigan and my gift is truth. And here's how it is. Like, Feyre was made and it's not a coincidence. And like, this is like what we need to do. And they
sounds fake.
Yeah, they're like, sounds like fake news, but they refuse. And they're like, give us proof. that your people live in peace and that you're worth allying with and worth defending. And so Rhys tells the inner circle, like they go home and he meets with the inner circle and he's like, we have to show them Valaris. And they're all like, Rhys, like, no, we can't trust them. And he's like, there's no other way. Like, they won't trust us without this proof. And so he's like, we have to go into the hewn city, which is like the main city in the Court of Nightmares, which is the part of the night court that Amarantha modeled Under the Mountain after. So that is where Morgan is from originally. And that is basically what Morgan rules now as like Rhys's second in command. And so they're like, we have to go into the hewn city and steal this orb. It's like an orb of truth, and it's called the Veritas. And so this like magical orb is going to prove to the queens that Valaris is real, and like we can't trick them with this. They can only show things that are true. And so they also tell Feyre about the story of Miriam and Prince Dracon. I don't know his name. What? Draken. Prince Draken. And how they fought in the war. They joined their peoples together and they live in peace in like a secret island. Like a lot of people think they're dead. And Feyre's like, well, we could just ask them to like send proof. And Rhys is like, no, like we won't jeopardize their people's like safety, and it's out of the question. So they're like, okay, we have to go get this orb. And so Mor's father, Keir, is like the steward of this city under the mountain, and Rhys like lets him be in charge, quote unquote, but really he's just like Rhys holds all the power.
In charge.
yeah and so is Mor, and like Keir knows it, and they resent Mor so much because like they treated her like garbage, and we'll get to that later. But like anyway, like no one likes going there because no one can stand Mor's family. They're all horrible people. Everyone like in this city, they're all just disgusting, horrible creatures. They're everything that Amarantha was inspired by. It's a bad place to be. And so Rhys is like, Feyre, I kind of don't want you to go. And Feyre's like, no, like don't do that to me. That's what Tamlin would do. And he's like, okay, but like here's what needs to happen. And she's like, I'm in, like let's just do it. So she is like, they're flying to the Court of Nightmares the next day to like go do this plan to steal the orb. And Rhys is like really super tense. Like he has made it clear he's gonna have to act like a major asshole. He's gonna have to act like he did Under the Mountain, and he does not want Feyre to see that. And so she can tell he's super tense about it, and so she's like trying to joke and flirt with him to distract him. And then all of a sudden they're like being shot at with arrows. So Rhys like flies them to safety. They don't get hit with any of the arrows, but Rhys is like, what the absolute hell was that? Like we just got attacked. And so he meets up with Azriel and Cassian, and they're like, okay, we have like an hour before we're expected under the mountain, but like, or not under the mountain, but like in the hewn city. So like, let's split up and like look for these attackers. And like Feyre helps Azriel because she's like a good huntress too. But they don't find any sign of the attackers. It's like they just disappeared. It's crazy.
I'm gonna drink really quick one.
Yeah, I was starting to get a little scratchy
Dude,
there.
this synopsis may be longer than like our normal episode last week.
We can cut it down. What time is it? Oh my god.
Yeah, we're going on like 2.5 hours.
Oh my god.
It's fine.
It is fine.
So maybe for like the next one, like I don't know. Maybe
I don't
not
even
like
know.
as in depth. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see what everyone says.
I literally don't even know how to make this better. Anyway.
We're in too deep now to stop. So
Oh yeah. We're finishing this.
yeah. How many?
And then I'll edit it down and see what we can get it to.
I mean, we're more than halfway done, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did we stop?
Okay, so they're about to go to the Hewn City. So we're like here, if you can see my highlight.
Yeah. Okay, so we arrive at the Hewn City, and Farah is just being freaking like stared at by every member of the court. Like she's looking like a freaking queen too. Let me tell you what. It's like a dress that really matches like what she had to wear under the mountain, but like better. She has her crown on, she has her makeup done, she's looking amazing. So while they're under there, so we have, you know, Cassian and Azriel and Reese who are still hunting for the people who shot at them. So they're using basically themselves as their own distraction. And so there's like this whole grand entrance when Reese and the inner circle all come in, and they're looking like badasses. And honestly, if you want a song to listen to while you read this, I would definitely suggest what's it called? The Lion by Saint Mesa. Listen to that while you are reading that chapter. It is 10 out of 10.
I've never heard it. Okay.
So good. Yes. So anyway, the whole plan is to act as Reese's plaything. That's Feyre's role. It's to act as his whore, basically. So she is sitting on his lap. She is feeling him up. They are getting hot and heavy on this throne. It is an amazing chapter for me. Basically, like trying to distract Kier. He is hella uncomfortable, and like he is just like forced to watch them because Reese is like, yeah, don't move.
Yeah, he's being sexually harassed in his workplace by his employer.
He's like forced to watch them like basically like hump each other, like dry hump each other on this throne while Moore like goes and retrieves the orb.
And we would feel bad for him, but Kier's a piece of shit.
But Kier deserves it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kier deserves it. Anyway, so while they're, you know, out here getting it on to distract here, they're really into it. Farah realizes, you know, like she is feeling kind of guilty, like she should not be feeling the things that she does for Reese, but you can't help it.
He's hot.
Yeah, and Reese tries to make her feel fine about it. He's like, you know, it's just your body's natural reaction. And I'm like, yeah, but like, is it?
Yeah, like,
I get it. So anyway, Azriel gets the orb, signals for them to leave, and as Farah is getting up to leave, Kier, you know, kind of grabs her and is like, "You're gonna pay for this whore." And Reese freaks out. He's like, "The fuck did you just say to my girl?" And
my queen,
like my queen, basically like freezes him in spot, like breaks both of his arms, right? Yeah, both of his arms, and
piece
is
by
like.
piece.
Don't fucking fix these, like deal with it, let it grow back on its own. And like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, he's like, if I heard that you see a healer, like it's gonna be worse for
you're
you.
Gonna die. So it kind of goes like alpha male in
the
Hewn City, like, which is, I guess, like that's the role Reese is expected to play while he is, you know, in the Court of Nightmares. He's supposed to be like this very domineering force. So very different than what we've been seeing this entire book, but it does, you know, kind of line up with what we were seeing while under the mountain with Amarantha. So revisiting the High Lord, not always a fun memory. So they leave, and while everyone else goes back home, Reese actually detours with Farah to talk somewhere private before going back home. And she kind of freaks out on him. She's like, you don't need to protect me like that. You know, you're acting like Tamlin, basically. Reese does not like that. And you know, I really felt for him in this moment because, you know, Farah was being not fair. Like it was not fair of her. And, you know, basically he's like, you need to stop comparing me to him. I'm not like him. And you know, he knows that everyone sees him as the villain and Tamlin's always going to be the hero. And Feyre just kind of gets more defensive and tells Reese, you know, he wears the mask of the High Lord because he wants everyone to basically see that he's a monster, even to his closest friends. And it really strikes a chord in Reese, and he's really trying his best to, you know, I think kind of show Farah that he's trying and that he's, you know, willing to open up to her, but also he knows like whoever gets close to him is going to be a target basically the rest of their lives. And so she kind of speculates he puts up this front because he knows, you know, he doesn't really want to deal with the mess that he is inside. And they kind of end on just like a really bad note. And so Reese takes her
Sarah
home.
was very much projecting too.
Yeah, she was talking about herself, but directing it towards Reese, and it was super not fair. And so Reese ends up just taking her home, and they don't talk the rest of the night. They don't talk for the next few days. And he has gone out to hunt down their attackers, and so Feyre's kind of just left her own devices until someone's like, hey, Starfall is coming up here soon.
And you have to attend.
And you have to go.
And she's like, I don't know what that is, but I know how you Fae are and with your holidays. So Nuala and Caradwyn get her dressed in this like gorgeous gown. She's never been in anything more beautiful. It's like made of gemstones, like from head to toe. Gorgeous girls wear gowns made of gemstones. That was kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
So Cassian like flies her to the House of Wind. He's like, "Woo, you look good, girl." And she's like, "I know, isn't it crazy?" And so she gets flown up there, and that's where Reese has been hiding out, is in the House of Wind. So she's like expecting to see him right away, but he's not there at first. She sees a bunch of people are there to celebrate, but like they're just kind of waiting around. So she's talking with Moore, and all of a sudden Reese pops up. And she's like, oh, hey. And it's like awkward because like the last time they saw each other, they were fighting. And Reese is like, hey, let's go like watch this. Like I have a better spot where we can watch this. It's more private, it's quieter. So they go up to this balcony, and Starfall is like, there are these like spirits shooting across the sky that look like stars, that are like shooting stars really close by, but they're like some kind of like fae creature. It's similar to like the will-o'-the-wisps that Tamlin shows Feyre after the summer solstice. So it's a very similar moment to that first novel, where it's like she's alone with the High Lord and seeing this beautiful thing she's never seen before. And Reese and Feyre, they both feel bad for what they said. They're both like, I didn't mean it, I'm so sorry. And there's like kind of like this like buildup of like romantic tension, and all of a sudden Feyre gets hit in the face by one of the like stars flying by, like the spirits or whatever. So Reese is laughing, and she's like, stop laughing, it's not funny. And then she's like trying to like come after him, and he gets hit in the face with one. And so they're both just like cracking up because they're just covered in like this glowing like spirit, basically. They're covered in spirit guts. But Feyre, like, she smiled at Reese when all this is happening, and so Reese is like, do it again. Smile again. And so Feyre does. She smiles, and he's like, you're exquisite.
I know, I really wanted them to kiss, and they didn't
kiss, but he tells her, he's like, I wish I could take back the kiss under the mountain. And she's like, why do you say that? And he's like, because like it was a super unpleasant thing for you, and like
I was jealous,
I was angry, and I wish I could take it back. And Feyre's like, I'm really starting to care about this man. So they spend the rest of the night like dancing the night away with the rest of the friends downstairs. It's a really sweet moment for the book.
And so the next day gets a little less sweet. They end up going to the Illyrian war camp. It's Feyre, Reese, Cassian, and more, because Asriel, first of all, does not like going to the Illyrian camps. He does not have great relationships with them. And also he has some stuff to do with the Human Queens and Hybern. So they get to the camp, and they are greeted by Lord Devlin, who is a piece of work, who is just rude, and he, obviously doesn't really respect Reese or Cassian, and has been defying their wishes to train the women at the Illyrian camps, who are notoriously treated very poorly. So just really not like a good, warm and fuzzy welcome. So Feyre and Reese go into the woods. They're training with her powers. They're staying at his mom's old cabin, where he was originally trained as an Illyrian warrior. So kind of get away from everybody. They go train in the woods. Feyre's asking him about his history with Tamlin, and Rhys tells her that Tamlin and his dad were actually the ones who killed his mom and sister. So they killed them in cold blood. They thought Rhys was going to be with them and ambushed them. And even after seeing Rhys was not with them, cut off their wings, cut off their heads, and sent their bodies floating down the river for Rhys to find. So in a fit of rage, Rhys and his father decided to take retribution on Tamlin's family, and so showed up at the Springcourt Manor, murdered Tamlin's father. Rhys-Anne's dad actually ended up killing his mother as well, even though he said he wasn't going to, and then murdered both of his brothers. And so by the time they get to Tamlin's door, Rhys is like, you know what, no more blood needs to be spilled. We have done what we came to do. His dad's not having it. And so the second he opens Tamlin's door, Tamlin immediately knows what's happened, and so kills him on sight. And at that time, the role of the High Lord passes on to both Rhys and Tamlin. And they kind of call it a truce. They call it a draw, and they're like, you know what? No more. Rhys runs away. He's done.
He's like, let's cut our losses.
He's like, let's get out of here. And so they have just a very tumultuous relationship, and they had started off as friends, and really the whole reason it happened was because Tamlin's dad felt threatened, because he was a little coward baby.
And Tamlin was a little weenie and like sold Rhys's family out. Like the only reason he knew where they'd be is because Rhys and Tamlin's
friendship. So Tamlin has zero respect for me, because he murdered two women for no reason. So anyway, like they're talking, and hold on. Okay, so the next morning, Moore leaves for the Hewn City. She's going back to deal with some court stuff, and then Feyre and Rhys go out for another training session. Feyre tells Rhys to stay back a little bit, kind of the same deal with when they were in the human realm. And so Rhys goes away so that she can, concentrate on working on her skills. And she is approached by Lucien this time. So she's just getting snuck up on left and right from strange men. Bronn and Hart are also there, who were 2 sentries for Tamlin. So Lucien basically, again, tries to gaslight her. And he is like, things just haven't been right at home since last time you were here, and Tamlin's been out of his mind with worry, and you need to come back and fix things. He's like, yeah, how could you just leave us like that? Blah, blah, blah. And like, Feyre was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I am not coming back home. And he was like, no, you have to, like, we messed up and we need you to fix it. And she's like, no, like, fix your own shit. Like, not my problem. And so, Lucien tries to grab for it and just winnow her back home against her will. And all of a sudden, Rhys appears after Feyre winnows back, and basically Rhys is like, over my dead body, will you take her? And Lucien still is trying to fight her. And so Feyre does the most dope thing on earth, and she shapeshifts even though she was afraid to. And so she grows her own Illyrian wings, and she has talons, and basically becomes like this monster, and tells Lucien to go fuck himself, and to tell Tamlin to leave them alone, like she's not coming back. And he is disgusted with her. He is just like, what have you let them do to you? Like, this is not you. And like basically runs away and goes back.
Also, Lucien, homie, also feels like projection. Like,
it's like,
what have you let them do to you? What did you let them do to you?
Yeah, come on, man.
You used to mean something. You used to be a friend. You used to have a spine.
And who are you now? So they are, a little bit out of shape after this whole meeting. And instead of going back to the camp, they end up staying in an inn for the night. And my absolute favorite trope is the one bed. Anyway, so they have to stay in the attic room. There's one singular bed for them to share.
What? One bed, but there's single bed. 2 people.
Isn't that crazy? Oh man, what are they going to do? They're going to share that bed, is what they're going to do. And so there's one bed. They end up eating dinner. They're drinking some wine. They are, just sharing some secrets, talking with each other. So they end up going to bed. They're cuddling for warmth, is what they've told us. And Feyre decides, you know what? I may feel guilty, but I don't feel that guilty.
Well, also, before they get in bed, I have to say, like, they're doing the thought for a thought thing.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Reese said, I'm thinking that I look at you and I feel like I'm dying. Like I can't
Very
breathe.
poetic.
I'm thinking that I want you so badly. I can't concentrate half the time I'm around you. And so Feyre has this like moment of, oh my God, he likes me back.
Yeah, and so whatever remaining guilt she had is gone at that point, and like risks it all for my boy Reese. The thing that pisses me off though is that Reese is like, what do you want? Like tell me, like be clear with me, like what do you want? And Feyre's like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna mess around with them, like I just want a little bit of fun. And Reese takes that personally.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, fine, if that's all you want, like that is what I will give you.
Yeah, he's
And
like,
so,
that's all you're offering me, and I worship the
like
ground you
that's
walk
what
on.
I'll take. So they have a wonderful night together. We won't get into too many gratuitous details here. But they do spend the night with each other, and it is spicy.
Yeah, so the next morning after they have that little moment, they're leaving, they're flying to a different location. And so as they're flying, like there's a little bit of tension, like they're both kind of distracted. All of a sudden, they're being attacked again, like they were before
They're
they were
always
flying to
attacked.
Dune City. Yeah, like they're always in danger. So they're getting attacked again. This time, Reese actually gets hit with the arrows. So he kind of like yeets Feyre to safety to like get her out of the path of these arrows. But she is like thrown kind of from where he's at. She kind of like follows her way back by winnowing. She like tracks where he went. So she realizes that the captors have like taken him somewhere else. And so she winnows her way all the way there. She can hear that they're like torturing him in a cave. And so she's like, I am become Blade.
Little mal action.
A little mal action. So Feyre M become Blade. She has picked up these arrows that they shot down her man with. She's made them into daggers, and she's winnowing and killing these motherfuckers left and right. She's like, how dare you? I am the only one that can bring harm to this man, and how dare you? And I will, and I have. And so she gets to Reese. He is in a bad way. Like he has been shot with arrows. There's poison on the arrows too.
Not doing well.
He's not. So she winnows him away with the rest of like her strength. She winnows him to this like cave that she saw earlier. And so she spends the night like worrying he's gonna die in his sleep. And the next morning she's like, I have to track down the Suriel. So she takes her cloak because Alice told her like, you don't need a dead chicken. All you need is a new cloak. Yeah. So she captures the Suriel again. Although she's kind of like, that was really easy. Like, I kind of wonder if the Suriel's just doing.
He was like, girl, I've been waiting for you for hours.
The Suriel's like,
where have you been?
It took too long to call for me. Like, I want to catch up. Like, you have my address. Write me a letter.
Like, oh, thank God it's you.
So the Suriel, she's like, shoot me straight. Like, how do I heal Reese? And the Suriel's like, well, he's poisoned, but you have like this healing power in your blood from the Dawn Court. So just feed him your blood. And Feyre's like, gross, but okay.
Sure.
And so she is like cutting it free. And it's like, also there's this weed that heals or that grows nearby that helps your mate heal more quickly. And she's like, whoa.
She's like, okay, cool. Wait a minute.
Did you say mate? And he was like, yeah, like your mate. Like Reese is your mate? And Pharaoh's like, you're joking.
No.
You're absolutely joking. And the Suriel's like, wow, you didn't know? That's hilarious. And Pharaoh's like, yeah, okay, well, see you next time. I need to chat. And so she returns to Reese. She's mad. She heals him, but she is so mad that he
throwing shit at him. Like,
yeah, she's like,
here, choke on this
drink my blood, eat this weed. It's so gross, but he's dying. So he's like, okay. And she's like, how long have you known? that we're mates. And he's like, okay, so we're doing this. So he's like, okay, so I knew when Amarantha was killing you. And she's like, that's a long time, Reese. And he's like, yeah, I admit, I was keeping things from you. And she's like, yeah, who else knows? And he's like, there's Morgan, there's Cassian, there's
Cameron.
Azriel. And she's like, okay, stop. You're making me very upset. I want to go home. I want to go back to the Illyrian war camp. So he's like, with what little strength he has, he winnows them there. She immediately finds Moore and she's like, I need to be alone. And Moore is like, she's kind of torn at first. She's like, my allegiance, where does it lie? But Farah's like, Moore, I'm serious. Like, I need to be alone. So she's like, okay, I got you. She winnows her to like this mountain and there's a cabin they can walk to. And she's like, this cabin is warded, so no one can winnow in. It's like only open to our family, so like no one can approach it unless they're like part of the family. And so Farah's like, perfect, like I'll just hole up here. Which brings us to part 3, the final part, the House of Mist.
All right, so part 3. So we start off with Farah, back in the cabin. She has been here for a couple of days. She is bored out of her mind, so she starts kind of digging through some stuff and ends up finding some paint supplies in one of the closets. And she finally allows herself for the first time in a very long time to start painting. And she kind of goes balls to the wall with painting. Like, not a single permission was asked. She's like, I'm going to paint every single wall in this home. And I always think it's so funny because it's like an ongoing joke that Farah's like actually not good at painting.
Yeah, so canonically, like Farah's a horrible painter and she's covered basically the entire walls of the cabin with like her like paintings. And so like, what if they look like hieroglyphs? And it's just stick figures all over.
It's like
wall.
Absolute nonsense all over the stuff. Yeah, so she has like painted everything, and so Moore arrives just to check in on her, just to make sure she's like not dead. And she's like, oh my god, like, what have you done? And so like, she's really just painted a lot of bits and pieces of the inner circle. And Moore asks, why have you not painted Reese? And she was like, I just couldn't bring myself to. And Moore is like, is it really that bad being his mate? And she's like, no, it's absolutely not. And so kind of got her own answer to, is she going to let Reese back in her life? Yeah, absolutely she is. So Farah sees Moore off the next morning, and stares out the window, kind of allowing herself to daydream about life in Valaris and, owning her own paint studio and giving lessons and having this life with Reese. And so really just, allows herself to put together what her ideal future looks like, and she's ready to defend it and make that happen at whatever cost, and then proceeds to paint the rest of the cabin. She has been here for like 5 or 6 days at this point in time, and like is living the hermit life, and finally hears another knock at the door, and she opens it and it's Reese.
So she has already made up her mind before she even sees Reese. Like, she knows she wants to be with him. That's like, she knows it in her heart. And so she invites him in and she's like, are you hungry? Like, I can heat up some soup for you. And he gets all tense and weird. And she's like, listen, I don't know all the Fae like rules. You're going to have to explain this one to me. So he's like, traditionally, when a female offers her mate food for the first time, it means she's accepting the mating bond. And so Farah's like, well, then, okay, tell me the whole story and we'll see if I'll offer you food. And so he tells her, like, I began having dreams about you back when you were still a human. I was having like flashes of your life that were like foggy. And then he tells her that he was seeing her nightmares when she entered Prithian, and they were a bunch like of like creatures that were from Prithian. So he knew she was there. And that freaked him out. He was like, what is this fragile human doing here in Prithian? So he saw another dream of hers, and it was about like the unlit bonfires of Kalanmai. And he was like, there's only one court that does the big celebration. So he tells Amarantha, let me go to the spring court during Kalanmai so I can spy on Tamlin. But when he's there, he immediately finds Feyre, and he's like, this is who I've been dreaming about. Like, I know it in my bones. Like, she smells right. This is the girl.
That's her.
And that's her. And so he's like asking her all those questions and stuff. And she's like, this man's dangerous. And so when he comes back to the Spring Court, like again in the first novel, to find that she was living there with Tamlin, he was pissed. He was like, that's my mate. And well, I mean, I don't know that he really knew it yet.
Kind of knew though.
He kind of knew, but he was like, that's mine. I want that safe. So he scares her by going into her mind as a way to like send her back home. He's like, she needs to get out of here. Like, she is not safe here. And so he said he had never known horror like when she was brought before Amarantha under the mountain. He was like, I thought I had gotten her safe back to her home.
God damn it.
I like saw this other human girl tortured to death, and I was willing to live with that, just knowing that you were safe with your family. But here you are. And so he like was upset about that, obviously, but he was like, you know what, maybe this is our chance to be free. So he was like, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you strong, keep you fighting, even though she hated him for it. And when Amarantha was torturing Feyre to death, like that's when he knew it for sure that she was his mate. And so he loses it. He takes that dagger ready to die because he's like, if Feyre's dying, I'm dying too, because she's my mate. And
romantic.
Yeah, it's tragic. So when Feyre does actually get killed by Amarantha, Rhys keeps her tethered there, not by their bargain, but by their mating
sheer
bond.
will alone.
Sheer will alone, and the power of true love. It's so strong. It's stronger than anything. Ask Disney. And so Feyre is like listening to all this. She is like, her heart's aching, and she asked Rhys, because he said that he loved her, like he knew that he loved her. And so Feyre's like, you love me? And he's like, yeah, I do. So she's like, okay, here's this bowl of soup. And then they bang
for like
an entire
chapters.
Yeah, like I don't know how many pages, but it's a lot. And so yeah, they're like, we're good now. We're together. They're together. Okay. It's clear.
They're married now.
And they're married. So you can back off. So things finally calm down a little bit with their little honeymoon phase. And Rhys is like, by the way, the queens are ready to meet. And Feyre's like,
awesome.
You couldn't have led with that. And Rhys is like, I'm sorry, I got distracted. And Feyre's like, okay, well, let's go. So she gets home, and the entire inner circle is like, we'll serve and protect you, Feyre. And she's like, calm down, like, let's just be friends. And they're like, oh yeah, that too. Like, we're friends, but also we'll die too. And so then they meet with the queens.
Yes, so they get to the mortal realm. They're back at Nesta and Elaine's home. So Morgan shows them Valaris and the orb, and the queens are like, okay, like that's pretty cool. And they're like, we'll get back to you in a few days.
They're
just
like, excuse?
Deliberate. And they're like, absolutely not. Like, we need to know, like, right now, can we please have this book? And they're like, yeah, no, like, we just don't think it's worth it, honestly. And so they dip out, and they're like, we will smell you later, like, lose our number. And so they're freaking out, and they're like upset. And then they notice that there is something that has been left in the chair of the Golden Queen, who has kind of been a tight ass this whole time. And she has left the second half of the Book of Breathings for them. And she said, you know, after reading the letter that Rhys-Anne wrote to her, she knows that he's trying to build a better world, and that she really does know, like, he wants to do it, especially for this woman that he loves. And so Feyre had no idea that he wrote this letter to them. It was really cute.
It was before they were mated, even.
Before they were even mated, that he was like, you know, this is the woman I love. These are the lands of her family, and I'll do anything to protect them. I was like, okay, love that for you. So anyway, she also writes a note saying, don't trust the others, and that the sixth queen, who has not been present at the meetings, is not sick as they had claimed. And so we're like, oh, okay. So like what's happened to the sixth queen here?
Yeah, where's
And
she at?
so like they're kind of in like getting into panic mode here. They know no one is safe, that stuff is getting ready to go down, that the mortal queens have possibly betrayed them at this point. And so Reese offers their home to Nesta and Elaine. They're like, no, we have to stay here in the mortal realm. He's like, all right, well, just know, this offer, it stands for as long as you want. I'll send someone at noon every day if you change your mind. And so they go back to Prithian. So Reese is away in the Court of Nightmares, and it's kind of just Feyre and Cassian hanging out. They're going to operas. They've been going around in the artist square chilling. When Feyre starts asking him, like, what's going on between you and my sister? Like, what's that about? Being a little busybody, as Cassian calls her. While they are talking, they notice that, something is not right in the sky. They're like, what the heck is that?
It's a bird. It's a plane.
It's the adder. Like a lot of them.
Yeah.
So the soldiers from Hybern are flying in to Valaris, and they're like, hold the phone. Like, how the heck do they know we're here? They get their answer when the adder approaches and drops the mutilated body of the golden queen who gave them the book of breathings onto one of the light stands in the street, and they understand that the queens have betrayed them and told Hybern where Valaris was. And so the secrets of the city are now well known to Hybern and all of their enemies. And so they are left to defend the rainbow and all Valaris. Cassian eventually does join in, and it's this huge battle basically of trying to protect the city and everything it encompasses. And Feyre actually does some pretty cool shit. So she really comes into her powers here. She is taking down different attackers. She is using, all the skills in her arsenal. She also starts learning how to like fully wield the power of like her water powers. And so using the sea to her advantage, attacking, different Hybern soldiers. Eventually Reese does, show back up eventually, but Feyre blocks him out pretty well and is kind of just doing her own thing and being a bad bitch.
Yeah, because he's only worried about her safety, and she's like,
I got other people to protect.
Yeah, and she's like, Reese, I gotta block you out. I'm sorry, because like there's people right here dying.
And probably the absolute coolest moment of this entire battle is when she finally sees the adder who is trying to escape. And so she winnows on top of him, has a freaking ash arrow ready to go, like stabs that motherfucker a few times, and free falls and like watches his body like splatter on the pavement. It's amazing.
Yeah. It was very much like she got her vengeance. She got vengeance for everyone. So yeah, Reese like finally comes to her and he's like, Feyre Cursebreaker, defender of the rainbow, because she single-handedly like destroyed an entire like legion of these soldiers that came to like show up and attack the city. So they get the wards back up around the city, and Reese is feeling extremely guilty because he like trusted the queens. And so the next day, Amren finally cracks the code, and she's like, okay, Feyre, here's what you need to do. You need to touch the cauldron and speak these words. She wrote them down for her. And the problem is Reese cannot winnow them into Hybern's castle because like they'll notice, like they have like wards in place to notice his magic. And so Cassian and Azriel have to take Feyre in while Reese and Moore like wait to winnow them out. And Amren's going to stay behind in Valaris and like defend it just in case. And so that night, like Reese and Feyre are having a moment. He gets the ring out that she retrieved from the Weaver's cottage and is like, will you marry me? And she's like, I risked my life for my own wedding ring.
Got that for myself.
And Reese is like, I know, isn't it beautiful? So
He's like, it's my mother's ring.
Yeah. And so she's like, Reese, like, I cannot wait to wear that. But the thing is, we're about to go into enemy territory tomorrow. And I think it's best that they don't know we're together, like, lest we get captured and they use that against us. And so he's like, what if I want to go one step further than a wedding? And she's like, I'm listening. But then like the chapter like cuts to a new scene. And so they're like going into the castle and everything is so easy. They're like, wow, there's not very many guards
Just
here.
left the front door open.
Yeah. And it's like, guys, it's because it's a trap. Asriel, bud, like you're supposed
Come on,
to,
you know better.
like, oh my God, it's so frustrating. So Feyre, like, she tracks down the cauldron. She's like, it's in there. So they walk in and she's like, this cauldron. Okay, it's worth noting, Amren told her, do not put the book halves together because that'll draw a lot of attention. And the cauldron is like, Feyre, you have these two halves of the book, put them together, like just see what happens. And Feyre like listens to the call of the fuck around and find out. And she listens and she puts them together against what Amren told her. And anyway, Azriel and Cassian are like, it's too late. She already is like slapping those together. So all of a sudden, Azriel like yanks her away and she's like, what the heck? I was about to nullify the cauldron. And he's like, look, and Jurian is coming down the stairs.
And also, Feyre's brain is like melting out of her nose at this point in time. Like, she does not have the situation under control, even a little bit.
Yeah, she's like, guys, I had it. And she's like bleeding out of her orifices. Yeah. So Reese immediately winnows in because he like senses all this is going on. And he like sneaks the book from Feyre and puts it in his jacket. So Jurian's like, where's Miriam? And Moore is like, well, she actually was mated and she married Prince Draken. I cannot say his name. And the night that you were slaughtered, and she doesn't care about you. And Jurian's like, you're lying. Like, she would never. And they're like, sorry, it is what it is. So Jurian shoots like a poison arrow into Azriel. The king of Hybern shows up and he's like, that poison's actually magical and I can send it straight to his heart if you don't follow me. So they all go upstairs and the king is like, okay, and now that I've upheld my end of the bargain, I expect you to uphold yours. Who is he talking to? Lucien and Tamlin. Lucien and Tamlin step forward out of the shadows.
Have never been so upset in my entire life than when I read that it's fucking Lucien and Tamlin who I don't know, it's disappointing.
It is.
Yeah, so Feyre is like, what on God's green earth could you possibly be doing here right now? And the king's like, yeah, like I struck a deal with them and I said if they could have you, then they will let me use their lands to like further my army basically. Yeah. And Tamlin was like, yeah, it was a pretty sweet deal. And she was like, are you joking?
I got it for a bargain.
It was a good deal. And so Feyre at this point in time, she is realizing like their chances of all getting out of here are pretty fucking dire. And so she is,
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, because there's a ward up that won't let any of them use their powers, like the people from the Night Court.
Yes. So basically she tells Tamlin like, yes, I will go with you as long as you promise like no one who is here with me is going to be harmed. And Tamlin's like, no, like I'm not going to do that. And so he realizes he can smell that Feyre and Reese are mated. They ended up like touching a little too close. Pissed. He is so upset. He's like, what is going on here? Like, how did he trick you? How did he trick you into this mating bond that is created by the cauldron itself, blessed by the
possibly
mother?
Be that you're in love.
Yeah, like how did he create this? How is he tricking you into this? Like, okay. And so Feyre is like, dude, I can't do this. And she's like, I'm gonna fuck you up, like basically, like this is
She's
it.
like, if you kidnap me, I will literally destroy you and your court from the
because
inside.
Tamlin's like reaching in here, he's like, just take my hand, take this poor singer's hand,
and she's
we're
like,
gonna go
okay,
back
but
to
I'll kill
the
you.
court.
I'll have
And
to
she's
kill
like,
you.
yeah, I will slash your throat. And so the king at this point in time kind of steps in. He's like, you know what's gonna make this party a little spicier is if I bring in your kidnapped sisters. And sure enough, there they are.
Gagged and bound. Here they come.
So the king explains to the queens that motherfucking Ianthe betrayed Feyre's trust, and like the entire time she was in La La Land, depresso mode, like she'd been telling Ianthe like all these stories about her sisters and like where they lived, and she was just cataloging this information for the King of Hyrule, who she met while she was hiding from Amarantha for 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a little coward. And so anyway, basically he wants to demonstrate that the cauldron is able to grant eternal youth to the queens, which is what they all wanted. They wanted to be young and immortal so that they never had to give up their thrones. They're very selfish. And so Tamlin is, bless his heart, is like, oh well, I didn't say that was cool, but as long as like I get what I want.
Yeah, I don't know. He does seem like, to his credit, he does seem a bit horrified because he knows it's going to upset Feyre.
Stop it.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, no, he tries, but the king actually does stop him. Like, he tries to lunge at him and the king like nullifies his power.
Was he gonna actually do anything though?
I doubt it, but like, let's give him the smallest
I'll give him some credit.
I do hate him, but like, we have to give credit where credit's due.
You're right. He did step up. Same thing with Lucian. He had them both like shackled to the floor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so freaking party starts and Elaine goes first and he's like, step right on up. I'm gonna toss you into this cauldron. So Elaine goes in. She is terrified. Yeah. She stays under for a few seconds in our time. It could have been a lot longer while she was under there. The cauldron tips up, spits little Elaine out, and she is suddenly high fae. And they just kind of leave her there chilling on the cold stones, and he is like, all right, Nesta's next. And Nesta is mad. She is spitting mad, like kicking, screaming, like she is not going into this cauldron willingly. So Lucian is finally like, let me help this poor girl who is lying cold on these stones,
shivering and afraid and traumatized,
shivering and terrified. And the King of Hyrule's like, all right, I guess, like it's fine. So he walks over there. What happens? A mating bond snaps into place, and Lucian's like, oh my god, you're my main. It's like, of course he is.
Yeah, I hate that, but it is what it is. So Nesta, she was pushed into the cauldron kicking and screaming. Literally, before she's shoved under, she flips off the king, and she's like, it's basically a promise on her end to fuck him up in the future. So they shove her under. Nesta comes out high fae as well and immediately goes to Elaine, and Lucian's like, Elaine's my mate, and Nesta's like, the fuck she is, like, back off my sister. And Feyre is like, all the while she's been sitting here watching this horrified, like, she's
throwing up on herself.
Yeah, she could not be more distraught. Like, she thought her nightmares were bad. This is worse than anything she could ever have imagined. And she's like, I can't let any more harm come to those that I love. So she's like, I'm going to take my power because I'm special and I'm made of something new. And so I'm going to tell these wards that I am not like, I am what these wards are made of.
I am also a ward.
Yeah, I too am a ward. I raise you one ward.
I still don't fully understand what happened, but that's okay.
I don't know, but the point is Feyre is everything and that she needs to be. Feyre's the hero of the story. She breaks the ward just enough to get some power through at first, but she eventually, like, I think shatters it because she sends out like this burst of light. This like burst of light means a lot to her and Rhys. It's like an intimate thing between them. So she's like, Rhys, like, are you picking up on my signals? This is for you. This message is for you. So she sends out a burst of light and like pretends that she's like screaming and crying in pain. And she pretends to be like awoken from a trance. And she's like, Tamlin, like, you saved me. Oh my gosh. Save me from these horrible people. And she demands to the king. She points at like the tattoo on her left arm and she's like, break the bond between Rhys and I, break it. And so the king breaks the bargain that they made under the mountain. And he thought it was the mating bond, but it wasn't, because apparently that's like,
you can't break the mating bond
so much deeper inside of them. So she's like, Rhys, I need you to play along. He does. Like, he gets what she's doing. They're playing a ruse. And so Feyre's like speaking silently, and everyone like understands. They
like,
take
get
her
my sisters out.
Yeah, they like winnow her sisters out of there. And she's like, Tamlin, oh my god, I love you, I missed you, thank you so much. And he's like so dumb, and he's like, yeah,
he's like, I know you did.
You.
Like, I'm here now.
Everything's fine now that I'm here. And Lucian's like, wait,
bitch, what?
They just took your sisters, and you're over here like making out with Tamlin and pretending it's fine. And Feyre's like, oh, Lucian, no, don't worry, we'll get them back, don't worry. And Lucian's like,
am I the only sane one here right now?
Lucian's like, something's not right. Something is not right. But he has no spine and he won't say it. So,
and we'll touch on that later as well. But this, after Feyre is, bamboozled the entire court of Hybern into thinking that her bond has been broken, and we do have like a brief flash over to the point of view from Rhysand, which we don't get the entire book, which is super exciting. And so the inner circle returns home, and Amren immediately is just like, where is she? Yeah. And Rhys is like, yep, so anyway, like, what we need to do next? And Amber's like, no, like, where is she?
Where is my best friend?
Yeah, she's like, my new bestie, where is she at? And so Rhys is basically like, well, Feyre, our, best friend, is in there destroying the spring court from the inside out. You know why? Because she is now our high lady of the night court. And so he has gone behind everyone's back. Remember when they said, let's go see a priestess? Yeah, he had Feyre made into a high lady. Super freaking cool shit. And so
she's his equal.
She's his equal. We love a feminist. And so he is having Feyre dissolve the spring court from the inside out, and she is now his high lady and his spy. And so we flash back to Feyre. She returns back home with Tamlin and is like, I'm so glad to be home. Lucian is just like, dog, I don't know. Something about this is not quite right. Like, how did you break free of this spell again? And she's like, don't even worry about it. I'm not really sure.
I don't remember, but like,
my brain must have been just splattered. I don't know. It's wild. And he was like, okay, I guess.
Yeah, remember, I'm a dainty victim who needs protection. Remember, Lucian?
And so Tamlin is just being Tamlin, absolutely blinded by his own arrogance and fucking, I hate him. And is just like, yes, like, this lady broke that spell for me because she knows I'm her one true love. Mm-hmm. For her mate, forget that guy. Like, that's not even a real bond. We don't know her.
Yeah, he's so, like, what is a mate?
It kind of ends with Feyre almost giving us like a little smirk at the end, like, haha, like, get ready because you're about to get your shit rocked.
Yeah. She absolutely gives a little glance to Lucian, and she like is putting on this front. She can tell Lucian is like seeing straight through it, but she's like, what does it matter? Because Tamlin believes me. And that's all that
matters. Stupid. Tamlin is a dumb himbo who probably can't even count.
I just knocked my ring off my finger. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so Tamlin's a dum-dum, but that kind of wraps up the long ass synopsis of this book. It's a very long book in our defense. So that ends part 1, but stay tuned.
We are going to go ahead and cover more of our theories and symbolism and character development in our next part. So go check us out, and we will talk to y'all soon. And as always,
let's get lit.